The first time my daughter came back for her son after abandoning him for 11 years, she didn't bring flowers. She didn't bring photographs. She didn't even bring an apology. She brought a lawyer. And when that lawyer placed a folder on my dining room table, I knew before I opened it that whatever was inside wasn't about rebuilding a family. It was about money. My grandson, Ethan, was 16 years old. He was autistic, brilliant with numbers, uncomfortable around strangers, and more observant than most adults I had ever met. He was also sitting upstairs, completely unaware that his mother, the woman who had disappeared from his life when he was 5, had just walked into our home with documents that could change everything. I looked at the lawyer. Then I looked at my daughter. "Why are you here?" Claire didn't answer immediately. She ran her fingers along the edge of the folder. Finally, she said, "Because Ethan is my son." I felt something tighten in my chest. "Yes," I said. "He is. And I want to be part of his life again." "After 11 years?" Her eyes flickered. "People change, Mom." I stared at her. Maybe they did. But I had learned something during those 11 years. People could change their clothes, their jobs, their cities, even their stories. But when someone truly regretted what they had done, they didn't usually arrive with an attorney. Before I tell you what happened next, make sure you're subscribed to Royal Revenge Stories. Because this wasn't just a story about an absent mother coming home. It was about what she discovered when she came back, and what my grandson had quietly built while she was gone. My name is Margaret Whitmore. I'm 62 years old, and for 11 years, I had been both grandmother and parent to Ethan. I never planned for my life to turn out that way. I had expected to spend my 60s traveling with my husband, Daniel. We had talked about visiting Oregon. Maybe Maine. Maybe taking one of those long train trips across the country. Then Daniel died suddenly. Heart attack. One phone call. One knock on the door. One sentence from a police officer that split my life into before and after. I was still trying to understand how I was supposed to live without him when Claire told me she was pregnant. She was 27. Old enough to understand responsibility. Young enough to be terrified by it. When Ethan was born, Claire barely held him. I remember sitting beside her in the hospital. The baby was sleeping. His tiny fingers were curled into a fist. Claire stared at him. Then she looked at me. "Mom, I can't." I thought she meant she was overwhelmed. So I told her, "You don't have to do this alone." She shook her head. "You don't understand." "What don't I understand?" She looked toward the baby. "I don't think I can be his mother." I wanted to tell her that motherhood didn't always arrive as some magical feeling. Sometimes you simply learned how to do it. You learned one day at a time. You showed up. You kept showing up. That was what mattered. But Claire had already made up her mind. She stayed for a while. Long enough to learn Ethan's diagnosis. Long enough to become frustrated by his differences. Long enough to tell me that other mothers seemed to have easier lives. When Ethan was 3, doctors confirmed that he was autistic. Claire cried in the parking lot afterward. Not because she hated him. I don't believe that. She cried because she was frightened. But fear can make people selfish. And Claire became more distant. First she went away for a weekend. Then a week. Then she moved to another state. She promised she would come back. She promised she would call. She promised 100 things. Most of them never happened. By the time Ethan was 5, Claire had disappeared from his daily life. I tried to protect him from the truth. When he asked where his mother was, I told him she was living somewhere else. When he asked why she didn't visit, I told him adults sometimes made decisions they didn't know how to undo. When he asked whether she loved him, I said yes. That was the one answer I refused to compromise on. Because whatever Claire had done, I didn't want Ethan growing up believing he was unlovable. But children notice absences. Especially children who notice patterns. When Ethan was 8, he started asking why Mother's Day at school was different for him. When he was 10, he stopped asking about Claire altogether. That scared me more. One evening, I found him sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Yes." He didn't look up. "You're quiet." "I've been thinking." "About what?" He turned the laptop around. A spreadsheet covered the screen. "What is that?" "Prices." "For what?" "Everything." I laughed. He didn't. He explained that he'd noticed grocery stores changed prices at different times. He wanted to know whether he could predict when something would become more expensive. That was Ethan. When other children were interested in sports or video games, Ethan wanted to understand systems. He wanted to know why things happened. And if he couldn't find the answer, he kept working until he did. At 13, he started building software. At first, I thought it was another hobby. Then local businesses started asking questions. Ethan had created a program that helped small companies predict inventory needs. He called it TrackNest. I still remember the first time he showed me the program. "Grandma, look." I sat beside him. "I don't understand any of this." "You don't have to." "Then why am I looking?" "Because you're my quality control." I laughed. "You're 14. I know. You don't have quality control." "I do now." He smiled. That was the first time in years I heard him laugh without hesitation. So I supported him. Not because I thought he would become rich. I didn't. I supported him because he had found something that made him feel capable. Something that belonged entirely to him. We hired professionals where necessary. We kept records. We made sure his business was structured properly because he was a minor. I never touched his money. I never used it. I wanted him to know that whatever he built would remain his. By 16, TrackNest was no longer a teenager's side project. Several companies were paying for it. Then one regional grocery chain signed a larger agreement. After that, everything accelerated. One company became 3. 3 became 7. 7 became more. Then his accountant asked me to come into his office. I thought something was wrong. Instead, he slid a report across the desk. I stared at the number. $3.2 million. I looked up. "What is this?" "Estimated current valuation." I laughed because I thought he was joking. He wasn't. "Ethan's company is worth $3.2 million? "Approximately, based on the current contracts and projected revenue." I couldn't speak. My grandson was 16. He had built something worth millions while living in the same house where he had once cried because his mother wouldn't call him. I drove home in silence. I didn't know whether to tell Ethan immediately. When I finally did, he stared at me. "Does that mean we're rich?" I smiled. "No." He frowned. "It doesn't?" "It means your company is valuable." "Same thing." "Not exactly." He thought about that. Then he asked something that changed the entire conversation. "Does Mom know?" I looked at him. "Why would you ask that?" He shrugged. "She always cared about money." I felt a chill. "Why do you say that?" "Because when she used to visit, she asked Grandpa how much the house was worth." I had forgotten that. Ethan hadn't. He remembered everything. Every conversation. Every date. Every detail. That was when I realized something. If Claire ever found out about TrackNest, she wouldn't be returning to an empty life. She would be returning to a 16-year-old boy with a successful company. And I prayed she never found out. 3 weeks later, my prayer was answered in the worst possible way. A letter arrived. Not for me. For Ethan. The return address was an attorney's office. I opened it because Ethan was a minor. The first sentence made my hands go cold. We represent Ms. Claire Whitmore regarding the restoration of her parental rights and matters concerning her minor son. I read the letter twice. Then I called Ethan's attorney. He told me not to panic. I asked him one question. Does she know about the company? There was silence. Then he said, we need to assume she does. I sat down. The next morning, Claire called. I almost didn't answer. Mom? Her voice sounded softer than I remembered. Claire. I want to see Ethan. You haven't seen him in years. I know. Why now? She breathed out. I made mistakes. That doesn't answer my question. I miss my son. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I wanted to believe her. Then I asked. How did you find out about him? Another silence. I'm his mother. That isn't what I asked. Her voice changed. Mom, I don't want to fight. You brought a lawyer. I needed legal advice. About what? She didn't answer. I hung up. 2 days later, she arrived. A black SUV pulled into my driveway. Claire stepped out first. She was wearing an expensive coat. Behind her came a tall man carrying a leather briefcase. The lawyer. Claire looked at my house. Then she looked at me. Mom. I didn't move. Come inside. The lawyer entered. Claire followed. Her eyes immediately traveled around the room. The furniture. The photographs. The shelves. Then she noticed a framed picture of Ethan from his high school science fair. She smiled. He's grown. I said nothing. The lawyer placed his briefcase on the table. Claire sat down. I remained standing. Tell me the truth. She looked at me. About what? Why now? She lowered her eyes. I want my son back. No. Her head snapped up. No? You don't get to disappear for 11 years and call it getting your son back. The lawyer leaned forward. Mrs. Whitmore, Claire understands there has been a difficult history. I raised my hand. I wasn't speaking to you. He stopped. Claire looked angry. Then she whispered. You kept him from me. I almost laughed. You left him. You wouldn't let me. You stopped calling. I was struggling. You stopped sending cards. I was ashamed. You stopped asking about him. Her eyes filled with tears. For a second, she looked like the daughter I remember. Aired. Then the lawyer opened his folder. And everything changed. I think, he said carefully, we should focus on the future rather than the past. He pulled out several documents. Claire is seeking formal parental involvement in Ethan's affairs. What affairs? Educational. That's all? He hesitated. Claire looked at him. Then back at me. Financial as well. I stared at her. Why? Because he's a minor. That isn't an answer. The lawyer said, there are significant financial assets associated with Ethan. My heart began pounding. Claire looked at me. You never told me. There it was. Not concern. Not love. Not regret. Money. You knew about TrackNest, I whispered. Claire's expression changed. I know about my son's company. Who told you? She didn't answer. Who told you? The lawyer interrupted. Mrs. Whitmore, there are legal avenues available to Claire as Ethan's biological parent. I looked toward the staircase. At that exact moment, I heard footsteps. Ethan appeared. He stopped when he saw Claire. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Claire whispered, "Ethan." He stared at her. She smiled nervously. "Hi." He didn't answer. He looked at me. Then at the lawyer. Then at the documents. Finally, he said, "Are you here because of my company?" Claire's face went pale. I watched my grandson carefully. He wasn't crying. He wasn't angry. He was studying her. Like she was a problem he hadn't solved yet. Claire stood. "I came because you're my son." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Then why did you bring a lawyer?" The room went silent. Claire had no answer. And that's when Ethan did something neither Claire nor her lawyer expected. He walked to the dining table, opened his backpack, and pulled out a black notebook. He placed it beside the lawyer's folder. "I've been keeping records," he said. Claire frowned. "Records of what?" Ethan opened the notebook. Pages of dates. Calls. Messages. Missed birthdays. Old emails. Everything. He turned to one particular page. At the top, he'd written, "Why did MOM come back?" Then he looked directly at Claire. "I have 11 years of questions." He closed the notebook. "And I'm finally old enough to ask them." Claire stared at him. The lawyer slowly closed his briefcase. And I realized something I hadn't understood before. My grandson wasn't afraid of his mother anymore. He was preparing for her. What I didn't know was that Ethan had already discovered something about Claire's return that none of us had seen coming. And when he finally showed me what was inside the second half of that notebook, I realized the $3.2 million wasn't the real reason she had come back. It was only the reason she thought she could get away with everything else. I didn't ask Ethan what he meant by the second half of the notebook until Claire and her lawyer had left. I waited until the front door closed. Until the SUV disappeared at the end of the street. Then I turned around. Ethan was still sitting at the dining room table. The black notebook was in front of him. "Ethan," I said quietly. He looked up. "What did you discover?" He ran his thumb along the edge of the notebook. "I don't know if I should show you." "Why?" "Because you might get upset." I pulled out the chair beside him. "I'm already upset." He looked down. Then he opened the notebook. The first pages were exactly what I had seen earlier. Dates. Calls. Missed birthdays. But farther back, the handwriting changed. There were screenshots printed and taped onto several pages. Emails. Messages. Names. And one name appeared again and again. Daniel Mercer. I didn't recognize it. "Who is Daniel Mercer?" Ethan looked at me. "Mom's financial advisor." I felt my stomach tighten. "How do you know that?" "I found his name in one of the emails." "What emails?" Ethan turned the notebook around. There was a message printed on the page. It was from someone named Daniel Mercer to Claire. The date was 6 months earlier. The subject line was simple. "Your son's company." I read the first few lines. Then I stopped. The email wasn't about Ethan's health. It wasn't about school. It wasn't even about reconnecting with him. It was about TrackNest. The message discussed the company's growth, estimated valuation, ownership structure, and Ethan's age. My hands went cold. "Where did you get this?" "I found it online." "What do you mean?" "Some of Mom's old accounts weren't private." He looked uncomfortable. I wasn't trying to spy on her. I know. I was trying to understand why she suddenly contacted me. I looked back at the email. There was a sentence near the bottom that made my heart pound. If the company continues growing at its current rate, there may be an opportunity to establish financial control before he reaches adulthood. I read it again. Then again. Ethan. I know. You understand what this means? Yes. He closed the notebook. She didn't come back because she missed me. I couldn't find the words. For 11 years, I had protected Ethan from the idea that his mother didn't want him. Now I had to protect him from something worse. The possibility that she wanted him for what he owned. I reached for his hand. Whatever happens, you don't have to deal with this alone. He nodded. Then he asked. Grandma, can I tell you something else? Of course. I'm not scared of Mom. I looked at him. He continued. I'm scared of what people might do because of her. That sentence stayed with me. Because he was right. Claire might not have been the mastermind. She might have been following someone else's advice. And if that was true, then we had a much bigger problem. The next morning, I called Ethan's attorney. His name was Robert Hayes. He had represented us since TrackNest became a serious business. I sent him copies of everything Ethan had found. He asked me to come to his office. I took Ethan with me. Robert read the documents in silence. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. This is concerning. Can she take control of his company? Not simply because she's his biological mother. Then why did she bring a lawyer? Because she's trying to create leverage. I frowned. What kind? Control over a minor's financial affairs can become complicated. The exact rules depend on the state and the existing legal structure. So what do we do? Robert looked at Ethan. We make sure every part of the company is properly documented. Ethan nodded. I already backed everything up. Robert smiled slightly. I figured you had. Ethan pulled out a small external drive. I have 3 backups. Robert looked at me. He's more prepared than most adults. I smiled. He's been that way his whole life. But Robert wasn't smiling anymore. There is one thing I want you both to understand. What? If Claire is being advised by someone who knows about the company's valuation, this may not be about custody at all. I stared at him. What else could it be? Robert folded his hands. Influence. That word sounded harmless. It wasn't. He explained that if Claire could position herself as a concerned parent, she could potentially gain access to information she had no legitimate reason to possess. Company documents. Financial records. Contracts. Accounts. And if she could convince a court or other professionals that Ethan needed parental oversight, she might gain influence over decisions. Not necessarily ownership. But enough influence to create problems. Ethan listened carefully. Then he asked. What if I don't want her involved? Robert looked at him. Then we need to make sure your wishes are clearly documented. Ethan nodded. I want that. Robert reached for a folder. We'll start there. For the first time since Claire returned, I felt like we weren't completely helpless. But that feeling didn't last long. 3 days later, I received a letter. This one wasn't from Claire. It was from a bank. They had received a request for information concerning Ethan's financial accounts. The request had been made by someone claiming to be his legal representative. I called the bank immediately. They wouldn't discuss details over the phone. Robert contacted them directly. Within an hour, we discovered the request had been rejected. But it had happened. Someone was testing the door. Trying to see if it would open. And then something even stranger happened. One of Ethan's business partners called. He sounded nervous. Margaret, has Ethan authorized anyone to discuss the company? No. Because someone contacted me yesterday. Who? He said he was representing the family. I felt a ch. Ale. What family? He mentioned Claire. I looked at Ethan. His face had gone completely still. What did he want? He asked about the company's contracts. Did you tell him anything? No. I thanked him and hung up. Ethan stood. That's enough. What? I'm going to find out who Daniel Mercer is. Robert had warned us against investigating anyone improperly. So we didn't. We used legitimate public records and information already available to us. What we found was surprising. Daniel Mercer wasn't simply a financial advisor. He had worked with several small technology companies. 2 of them had failed. One had been sold under complicated circumstances. And Claire had been connected to him for nearly 3 years. 3 years. Not 6 months. Not 1 year. 3. That meant Claire's return wasn't spontaneous. Someone had been watching Ethan for a long time. The question was why. I asked Ethan if he knew anything else. He shook his head. Then he said, "There is something I haven't told you." My heart sank. What? He went upstairs. A few minutes later, he returned with his laptop. He opened a folder. Inside were recordings. Not secret recordings. Video meetings and business calls that Ethan had legally saved as part of his company's documentation. He opened one file. It was a meeting from 8 months earlier. Ethan was speaking with a potential investor. I listened carefully. Nothing seemed unusual. Then the investor asked a strange question. How involved is your mother in the business? Ethan answered. She isn't. The investor paused. Does she have any legal authority over you? No. Are you certain? Yes. The investor nodded. The meeting continued. At the time, Ethan hadn't thought much of it. Now we did. Who was that? I asked. A consultant. What was his name? Paul Grant. Robert searched the name. Then he stopped. Paul Grant had worked with Daniel Mercer. The room went quiet. I looked at Ethan. They've been connected. He nodded. And there's more. He opened another file. This one was an email chain. The names were partially hidden. But the context was clear. Someone had been asking questions about Ethan's company months before Claire ever contacted us. The company valuation. His contracts. His age. His legal status. His mother. Everything. I felt sick. Ethan, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know if it meant anything. You're 16. I know. You shouldn't have to figure this out alone. He looked at me. That's why I'm telling you now. I hugged him. He stiffened for a moment, then relaxed. For years, I'd worried that Ethan would always need me to fight his battles. That afternoon, I realized something had changed. He wasn't asking me to fight for him. He was asking me to stand beside him. That was different. And then Claire called. She didn't sound angry. She sounded almost cheerful. Mom, can we talk? WH. Do you want? I'd like to see Ethan. He doesn't want to see you alone. I understand. You're still represented by an attorney. Only because I'm trying to do things properly. I almost laughed. Then why is someone contacting his business partners? Silence. What are you talking about? Don't play games with me. I don't know what you're talking about. Daniel Mercer. The silence became longer. Then Claire said, "Who told you that name?" I closed my eyes. There it was. Not denial. Not confusion. Fear. "You just answered my question." She hung up. I stared at the phone. Ethan was standing across the room. "What happened?" "She knows him." He nodded. I thought she might. The next morning, something arrived at our house. A package. No return address. Inside was a single envelope. My name was written across it. I opened it. There was one sheet of paper. A typed sentence. "You are making this harder than it needs to be." Below it was another sentence. "Let Claire be his mother again, and everyone walks away happy." I stared at the paper. Then I noticed something. The paper wasn't threatening me. Not exactly. It was negotiating. Which meant whoever sent it believed they had something I wanted. But what? I turned the page over. There was a handwritten number. $3,200,000. Underneath it. That's what this is really about. I immediately called Robert. He told me not to contact anyone. Keep the envelope. Of course. Don't respond. I won't. Then he said something that changed my understanding of the entire situation. "Margaret, if someone is trying to pressure you before any legal proceeding even begins, they're making a mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "They're creating evidence." I looked at the envelope. For the first time, I smiled. Not because I was happy. Because I finally understood something. Claire and whoever was advising her thought we were frightened. They thought an old woman and an autistic teenager would be easy to intimidate. They were wrong. But we still didn't know the most important part. Who had sent that envelope? 2 days later, we found out. And the answer wasn't Daniel Mercer. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't even someone we'd suspected. It was someone I had known for almost 20 years. Someone who had eaten at my table. Someone who had hugged Ethan when he was a child. Someone I had trusted completely. And when Ethan showed me the name, I realized the betrayal had started much closer to home than I ever imagined. The name Ethan showed me was Michael Whitmore. My husband's younger brother. My brother-in-law. My own family. I stared at the name for several seconds. No. Ethan didn't say anything. I looked at him again. "Where did you get this?" He turned the laptop toward me. There. An email. Michael's name appeared in the sender information. The message was short. "Daniel, I think Margaret is becoming suspect. Yes. Keep Claire focused on the legal route. If she starts asking questions about the business, don't tell her everything yet." I read it twice. Then I felt my hands go cold. Michael had known about Ethan's company. He had known about Claire. And apparently, he had been communicating with Daniel Mercer. But there was something that bothered me even more. The email was dated 4 months before Claire contacted us. I stood up. "I need air." I walked outside and sat on the porch. The same porch where a police officer had once told me my husband was dead. The same porch where Ethan had waited for school buses. The same porch where I had spent 11 years believing our family was broken simply because Claire had walked away. Now I understood that someone else had been quietly moving pieces around us. And I didn't know how many pieces there were. Ethan came outside. He sat beside me. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Are you angry?" I looked at him. "Yes." "At Uncle Michael?" "Yes." "Are you going to confront him?" I shook my head. "Not yet." He looked surprised. "Why?" Because angry people ask questions. He waited. Smart people collect answers first. He smiled faintly. That's what I was thinking. I put my hand over his. For the first time, I realized we were working together. Not grandmother and grandson. Partners. And that scared me. Because I knew the people on the other side were adults who had spent years learning how to manipulate systems. Ethan was 16. He shouldn't have had to learn this. But neither of us had chosen this fight. It had chosen us. The next morning, I called Michael. He answered on the second ring. Margaret? His voice sounded completely normal. That almost made it worse. Can you come over? Everything okay? I'd rather talk in person. There was a pause. Sure. He arrived that afternoon. He walked through the front door carrying a box of pastries. That was Michael. Whenever something uncomfortable happened, he brought food. He hugged me. I let him. Then he smiled at Ethan. Hey, buddy. Ethan nodded. Uncle Mike. Michael looked around. Feels like forever since I've been here. You were here last month, Ethan said. Michael laughed. Right. Ethan didn't smile. Michael looked at me. What's going on? I gestured toward the dining table. Sit down. He did. I put the printed email in front of him. His face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. His eyes stopped moving. He looked at the paper. Then at me. Where did you get this? I said nothing. He picked it up. Read it. Then placed it down. Margaret, I can explain. I leaned back. I hope you can. It isn't what you think. Then tell me what it is. He rubbed his forehead. I was trying to help Claire. Why? She reached out to me. When? Months ago. How many nths? He hesitated. Almost 3 years. Ethan looked up. 3 years. I felt something inside me crack. You've known for 3 years? Michael nodded. She contacted me after hearing about Ethan's business. So you knew about TrackNest? Yes. And you never told me? I didn't want to interfere. I stared at him. You didn't want to interfere? I thought Claire had a right to know about her son. You could have called me. I was afraid you'd shut her out. I almost laughed. You watched her disappear for 11 years. Michael lowered his eyes. She was my niece. She was Ethan's mother. He didn't answer. Then Ethan spoke. Did you give her information about my company? Michael looked at him. Only general information. What does that mean? Things that were already public. Ethan shook his head. That isn't true. Michael frowned. What? You told Daniel about my contracts. Michael's expression froze. How do you know about Daniel? Ethan didn't answer. Michael looked at me. Then back at Ethan. Who is Daniel? I almost smiled. Interesting. Michael realized his mistake. He stood. I think I should leave. No. He stopped. You're going to sit down. Margaret. You've known for 3 years. I said I was helping. You introduced Claire to Daniel Mercer. Michael didn't speak. That was answer enough. He walked out 10 minutes later. I watched his car disappear. Ethan stood beside me. He lied. Yes. Why? I don't know. But I was beginning to understand. Money was the obvious answer. Yet something about the situation still didn't fit. If Claire wanted control of Ethan's company, Why involve Michael? Why spend 3 years gathering information? Why approach business partners before even establishing parental involvement? There had to be something bigger. Robert helped us uncover the first piece. He called me 2 days later. Margaret, I found something. What? Daniel Mercer has been involved with Claire's finances for several years. I know. No, I mean something more specific. I waited. Claire owes him money. I sat down. How much? I'm still verifying it. Why does she owe him? Investments. What kind? Private investments. Some failed. That explained part of it. But not everything. Robert continued. I also found something concerning. What? Daniel has been trying to position himself around Ethan's company. My stomach dropped. How? Consulting proposals. Investment offers. Requests for meetings. Why would he do that? Robert paused. Because a growing company with predictable revenue can be very attractive to someone who's trying to recover losses. I looked at the wall. So Claire is the doorway. Possibly. And Ethan is the asset. Robert didn't answer. He didn't need to. I felt sick. The next day, Ethan received another email. This one was from Claire. She wasn't asking to meet. She wasn't apologizing. She wrote, I want you to know I'm not trying to take anything from you. I only want what's best for you. Ethan stared at the screen. Then he typed something. I stopped him. Don't answer. He looked at me. Why? Because we don't know what she wants you to say. He nodded. We saved the message. Then another arrived. You deserve to have your mother in your life. Ethan didn't respond. A third came. Your grandmother has kept important things from you. That one hurt him. I could see it. He stood abruptly. What does she mean? I don't know. Did you? Did I what? Keep something from me? I shook my head. Never intentionally. He stared at me. I need the truth. You always have it. He walked away. That night, I sat alone in the kitchen. I wondered whether I had protected Ethan so much that I had accidentally made decisions for him. The next morning, I knocked on his bedroom door. Can I come in? Yeah. He was sitting at his desk. I sat beside him. Your mother said I kept things from you. She did. She's right about one thing. He looked at me. I didn't tell you everything about the years after she left. Why? Because some of it would have hurt you. He was silent. I received letters from Claire. His eyes widened. What? Not many. How many? 7. Where are they? In a box. He stared at me. Why didn't you give them to me? Because some of them were cruel. What did they say? I hesitated. She blamed me. For what? For making it difficult for her to return. Ethan looked confused. I never stopped her. I know. He looked down. Can I read them? I wanted to say no. Instead, I said, yes. I brought the box upstairs. We opened it together. The first letter was from 6 years ago. Claire wrote that she wanted to see Ethan. Then she accused me of controlling him. The second letter was similar. The third contained a strange question. How much money is in Daniel's life insurance? I stared at it. Ethan read it too. He looked at me. Grandma. I know. The fourth letter mentioned our house. The fifth asked whether Ethan had any inheritance. The sixth asked about future assets. The seventh never mentioned Ethan at all. It asked about money. That was the moment something inside me settled. Claire had not suddenly become interested in Ethan. She had been thinking about money for years. But there was still one question. Why had she waited until now? Ethan answered it for us. He looked at the letters. Then at his laptop. Then he said, "Because I'm almost 18. I stared at him. Of course. At 18, her potential influence over him would change. The window was closing. Claire wasn't coming back because she had finally learned to love her son. She was coming back because time was running out. And someone was rushing her. That someone was Daniel Me. Sir. But there was another problem. The more we investigated, the more we discovered that Daniel wasn't simply advising Claire. He had a financial interest in one of her debts. If Claire could gain access to Ethan's company, Daniel could potentially benefit. That made everything more dangerous. So Robert recommended something simple. We stopped reacting. No angry messages. No confrontations. No accusations. We documented everything. Every email. Every call. Every request. Every person who contacted Ethan. Then we made one decision. We would let Claire believe she was getting closer. But we would protect Ethan's company from the inside. Ethan agreed. He changed nothing publicly. He continued working. He continued talking to clients. He continued answering business emails normally. And Claire grew impatient. Her messages became more frequent. Then came the first real threat. A formal petition. Claire was requesting expanded parental involvement. She claimed she was concerned about Ethan's welfare. She claimed I had isolated him. She claimed I had controlled his finances. And she requested access to information concerning his business. I read the document 3 times. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because it was so carefully written. Every painful truth had been twisted. Claire wasn't saying she abandoned Ethan. She was saying I had prevented her from being a mother. She wasn't saying she wanted access to his money. She was saying she wanted to protect his financial future. She wasn't saying she had ignored him. She was saying she had been kept away. It was almost convincing. Almost. Then Robert found something. A single document. A bank transfer. From Claire. To Daniel Mercer. The amount was $75,000. The date was 6 weeks before Claire first contacted me. The memo line said, Ethan Whitmore, Legal Strategy. I stared at the screen. Then I understood. This wasn't a mother trying to reconnect with her son. This was a plan. A financial plan. And we had just found proof that Claire had paid someone to help execute it. But there was something even more disturbing. The transfer had been made 6 weeks before Claire's first email to me. Which meant the legal strategy had existed before she ever pretended to care about rebuilding her relationship with Ethan. I thought that was the worst discovery we'd make. I was wrong. Because the next document Robert showed me contained a name I had never expected to see. And this time, it wasn't Michael. It wasn't Claire. It wasn't Daniel. It was someone who had been working directly with Ethan for nearly 2 years. Someone Ethan trusted. Someone I had personally chosen. And when I saw what they had signed, I finally understood why Claire had been so confident from the beginning. The name on the document was Sarah Collins. Ethan's accountant. I.S. Stared at it so long that Robert finally asked, Margaret? I looked up. She's been working with Ethan for almost 2 years. I know. She has access to his financial records. Only the records she needs. Robert turned the document toward me. Look at the signature. I did. Sarah had signed an agreement with a consulting company connected to Daniel Mercer. The agreement was dated 8 months earlier. 8 months before Claire ever contacted us. My mouth went dry. Why would Sarah sign anything with Daniel? That, Robert said, is what we need to find out. I called Sarah that afternoon. She answered immediately. Hi, Margaret. Can you come to my office? There was a pause. Is something wrong? I'd rather talk in person. She arrived 40 minutes later. She looked nervous before I even showed her the document. That told me more than her words could have. I placed it on the table. Explain this. Sarah stared at the paper. I can explain. Then explain. She sat down. I was approached by a consulting firm. Daniel's firm? Yes. Why? They wanted to evaluate TrackNest. Did Ethan authorize that? No. Then why did you sign? She looked down. Because I thought it was harmless. I felt anger rise in my chest. You thought signing an agreement involving a 16-year-old's company without telling him was harmless? I didn't give them confidential information. Robert interrupted. Your agreement says otherwise. Sarah looked at him. He continued. It grants the consulting firm access to certain financial projections and internal operational information. Sarah's face went pale. I didn't realize. You signed it, Robert said. She swallowed. I made a mistake. I leaned forward. Who paid you? She froze. I already knew the answer was going to hurt. Daniel. How much? She looked away. $20,000. Ethan was standing near the doorway. I hadn't realized he had come in. He heard everything. Sarah looked at him. Ethan, I'm sorry. He stared at her. You sold information about my company. No. You signed a contract. I thought they were helping. Helping who? Sarah couldn't answer. Ethan walked toward the table. He picked up the agreement. He read it carefully. Then he said something that surprised all of us. It's not a consulting agreement. Sarah looked confused. What? Ethan pointed to a paragraph. This gives them an option. Robert took the document. He read it. Then his expression changed. What kind of option? I asked. Ethan answered before he could. An option to purchase a minority interest in the company under certain conditions. I stared at him. Can they do that? Robert shook his head. Not without further legal review. Ethan looked at Sarah. Did you know? She started crying. No. Did Daniel know? I don't know. Did Claire know? Sarah covered her face. I don't know. Ethan P.L. aced the document back on the table. Then he walked out. I followed him upstairs. He was sitting on the edge of his bed. Ethan. He didn't look at me. I trusted her. I know. She was the first accountant I ever trusted. I know. He rubbed his eyes. Then he said, I'm tired of people deciding what they can take from me. That sentence broke my heart. I sat beside him. You're not losing anything. How do you know? Because we're going to protect it. He looked at me. What if we can't? Then we fight. He gave a small smile. You always say that. Because it's true. He looked toward the window. Then he said, I don't want revenge. I was surprised. What do you want? I want them to stop. I nodded. Then that's what we'll do. For the next several weeks, we changed everything. Robert brought in another attorney who specialized in business matters. We reviewed every contract, every account, every person with access to company information. We changed passwords. We tightened authorization requirements. We separated Ethan's personal finances from the company. We documented every suspicious contact. But we didn't tell Claire. We wanted her to believe her plan was still moving forward. That was harder than I expected. Because Claire began calling Ethan directly. The first time, he refused to answer. The second time, he answered. I stayed nearby. Hi, Claire said. Hi. How are you? Fine. I've been thinking about you. Okay. There was silence. I want us to have a relationship. You haven't explained why. I'm your mother. That doesn't explain why now. Claire sighed. I made mistakes. You keep saying that. I was struggling. You had 11 years. She didn't respond. Then she asked. How is the company doing? Ethan's expression changed. Why? I was just asking. You never asked before. I'm still your mother. And you're still asking about the company. She hung up. Ethan stared at the phone. I think she made a mistake. What do you mean? She got nervous. How? She forgot to pretend. He was right. Claire's next move came quickly. She filed another request. This time, she demanded access to certain financial records. Robert fought it. The court didn't grant everything she wanted. But the process itself created stress. Legal fees. Meetings. Documents. Questions. Ethan's school started noticing. He began sleeping less. His routines changed. One evening, I found him sitting on the kitchen floor. His laptop was closed. What's wrong? I don't know. I sat beside him. He stared at the tiles. Everyone keeps saying I'm lucky. I didn't understand. Because of the company. He swallowed. They think money fixes everything. I put my hand on his shoulder. It doesn't. I'd give all of it away if Mom would just leave me alone. I looked at him. No. He frowned. No? You don't give away something you built. Because someone else wants it. He looked at me. You worked too hard. But what if I don't care about the money? Then someday, you can decide what to do with it. I paused. But you should never surrender something because you're afraid. He thought about that. Then nodded. That was the first moment I saw the change in him. He wasn't becoming ruthless. He was becoming steady. And we needed that. Because Claire's next move was much bigger. One morning, Robert called. Margaret, I need you to come in. What happened? Claire has submitted new documents. What kind? Financial. I arrived within the hour. Robert placed a folder in front of me. Inside was a sworn statement from Claire. She claimed she had been financially responsible for Ethan before I took control of his life. She claimed she had contributed money to his upbringing. She claimed she had been prevented from accessing his financial information. And then she made a statement that stunned me. Claire claimed she had been involved in the creation of TrackNest. I looked up. She wasn't. I know. She wasn't even here. I know. She never touched the software. I know. Then why would she say this? Robert looked at me. Because someone told her she could. I stared at the document. There was another page attached. A list of alleged contributions. Amounts. Dates. Expenses. It looked convincing. Until I noticed something. The first payment listed was from a bank account Claire had closed years earlier. I looked at Robert. This is fake. Not necessarily fake. What do you mean? The transactions may exist. The question is what they were for. We investigated. And that was when the story started to unravel. Some payments were real. But they weren't for Ethan. They were payments Claire had made for her own expenses. Rent. Travel. Credit cards. Medical bills. She had taken ordinary personal expenses and relabeled them as support for Ethan. The more we checked, the more inconsistencies appeared. Robert smiled. She's making a mistake. What kind? She's creating a record. I remembered what he had said weeks earlier. Creating evidence. Claire thought she was building a case. Instead, she was building a trail. We documented everything. But then we found something far more important. One of Claire's documents contained a reference number. Robert traced it. It led to a private agreement between Claire and Daniel Mercer. The agreement stated that Daniel would receive a percentage of certain proceeds if Claire gained financial control over Ethan's assets. I stared at the page. So that's it. Robert nodded. This isn't just Claire trying to get access to her son's company. Daniel gets paid if she succeeds. Correct. How much? Robert pointed to the percentage. I read it. I couldn't believe it. Daniel would receive a significant portion of any transaction involving the company. That meant Claire wasn't acting alone. But there was one question left. Why would Daniel risk everything? Robert looked at the agreement. Because he has something to lose. What? Money. How much? Robert hesitated. More than he can afford. Daniel had debts. Large ones. His failed investments had left him exposed. TrackNest wasn't just an opportunity. It was a rescue plan. And Claire was the person he believed could unlock it. Suddenly, everything made sense. The lawyer. The bank requests. The business contacts. Michael. Sarah. The pressure. The timing. All of it. They believed Ethan's age made him vulnerable. They believed my role as his grandmother made me easy to intimidate. And they believed nobody would notice the connections. They were wrong. But then we discovered something that changed the entire strategy. Ethan's company had received an offer. A serious one. A national technology firm wanted to acquire a controlling interest. The offer was worth nearly $8 million. Ethan stared at the number. I don't want to sell. Robert nodded. You don't have to. But the offer changed everything. Because now, Ethan's company wasn't worth $3.2 million. It was potentially worth much more. And if Claire and Daniel had known about the offer, their urgency suddenly made perfect sense. I asked Ethan. Who knew about this offer? He thought for a moment. Me. Robert? Yes. Sarah? Yes. Anyone else? He shook his head. Then he stopped. Wait. What? He looked at me. Someone else knew. Who? He opened his laptop. He pulled up the acquisition proposal. At the bottom was a tracking record. Someone had accessed the document. The access happened 2 days after the offer arrived. The person had used a legitimate company login. But Ethan hadn't authorized them. He checked the account. His face changed. Grandma. What? The login belonged to me. I frowned. How? I didn't log in. Then who did? He checked the device information. The login had come from a laptop in our house. My heart stopped. There were only 4 people who regularly had access to that network. Me. Ethan, Sarah, and Michael. Michael had a key to the house. Sarah had visited several times. I looked at Ethan. Can you identify the device? He nodded. A few seconds later, the information appeared. Ethan stared at the screen. Then he whispered. It wasn't Uncle Mike. I waited. It wasn't Sarah either. Then who? He turned the laptop toward me. The device belonged to a computer that had been connected to our home network 3 days earlier. A computer I hadn't seen. A computer that had been brought into my house without my permission. And the login history showed something even worse. The person hadn't just opened the acquisition proposal. They had downloaded it. They had also accessed Ethan's private financial records. His client list. His contracts. And a folder marked Personal, do not share. I felt my stomach turn. Who brought that computer into the house? Ethan stared at the screen. I don't know. Then we heard the front door open downstairs. Someone had just walked into the house. I looked at the clock. Nobody was supposed to be visiting. Ethan slowly closed the laptop. We listened. Footsteps moved across the hallway. Then a familiar voice called out. Margaret? I looked at Ethan. It was Michael. And he wasn't alone. Standing beside him was Daniel Mercer. For the first time, I understood something. They hadn't come to negotiate. They had come because they believed we had discovered too much. And judging by the expression on Daniel's face, he already knew we were no longer playing defense. I didn't move. Neither did Ethan. Michael stood in the hallway with Daniel Mercer beside him. Daniel was the first to speak. Margaret, we need to talk. I looked at Michael. You brought him into my house? Michael raised both hands slightly. Please. Just hear us out. I glanced at Ethan. He was already reaching for his phone. I shook my head. Not yet. We needed to understand why they were here. I looked back at Daniel. You have 5 minutes. Daniel smiled. That's reasonable. He walked into the living room as if he belonged there. That bothered me more than anything else. He sat down. Michael remained standing. I stayed near Ethan. Daniel looked at him. Ethan, I've heard a lot about you. Ethan said nothing. I've been following the growth of TrackNest for some time. Ethan's expression didn't change. Why? Because it's an impressive company. You weren't invited. Daniel smiled. I understand. I interrupted. You accessed his files. I don't know what you're referring to. Someone used Ethan's account to access confidential documents. Daniel looked at Michael. Michael looked at me. Then Daniel said. That sounds like a technical issue. Ethan finally spoke. It wasn't. Daniel turned toward him. You seem very certain. I am. Why? Because I built the system. Daniel smiled. Of course you did. Ethan's fingers tightened around his phone. I could tell he was angry. But he remained calm. That was something he had learned over the past few months. Don't react first. Listen. Observe. Remember. I looked at Michael. Why are you here? He sighed. I wanted to prevent this from getting worse. You already made it worse. I didn't know how far Daniel was going to take things. Daniel looked irritated. Michael. Michael turned toward him. No. His voice was different now. I told you this was supposed to be handled differently. My heart skipped. You two have been planning this together. Michael looked at me. Not exactly. Then explain. He rubbed his face. I introduced Claire to Daniel. I know. I thought he could help her rebuild a relationship with Ethan. I laughed bitterly. A relationship that somehow required access to a multimillion-dollar company? Michael didn't answer. Daniel leaned forward. Let's stop pretending everyone here is innocent. I stared at him. What does that mean? Claire made mistakes. That's an understatement. She wants to repair her relationship with her son. Then she should do it without asking for financial records. Daniel sighed. You're making this emotional. It is emotional. It doesn't have to be. I stepped closer. You came into my house with my brother-in-law, after accessing my grandson's private records, and you're telling me this isn't emotional? Daniel remained calm. That calmness told me something. He wasn't afraid. Not yet. He believed he had leverage. What do you want? I asked. Daniel looked directly at Ethan. An opportunity. Ethan frowned. What kind? A meeting. No. Daniel smiled. You haven't heard the proposal. I don't need to. Ethan, your company is about to enter a very complicated stage. Growth requires capital. We already have capital. Not enough for what's coming. Ethan looked at me. Then back at Daniel. Who told you that? Daniel didn't answer. That was another mistake. Ethan stood. You accessed my acquisition documents. Daniel's face hardened. I didn't access anything. Someone did. Then perhaps your own security isn't as strong as you think. Ethan smiled slightly. I was waiting for you to say that. Daniel frowned. Ethan picked up his phone. I recorded this conversation. Michael's face went pale. Daniel stood immediately. You can't just. I can record conversations where the law allows it, Ethan said calmly. And our attorney will determine how it can be used. Daniel stared at him. For the first time, he looked uncertain. I felt something change in the room. The power had shifted. Not completely. But enough. Daniel picked up his briefcase. This is unnecessary. No, I said. This is over. He looked at me. No. It's just beginning. He walked toward the door. Michael remained behind. I looked at him. Are you leaving with him? Michael shook his head. No. Daniel stopped. Michael. Michael looked at him. I can't do this anymore. Daniel's expression hardened. You already did. Michael lowered his eyes. Daniel left. The door closed. Michael stood in silence. Then he said, I owe you the truth. You owe Ethan the truth. He nodded. And what he told us next was worse than I expected. Claire had contacted him almost 3 years earlier. She was struggling financially. She had debts. Daniel offered to help. But there was a condition. He wanted information about Ethan. At first, Michael said he only gave harmless details. What school he attended. What Ethan liked. How the company was growing. Then Daniel started asking more. Revenue. Clients. Contracts. Ownership. Future plans. Michael claimed he became uncomfortable. But he continued. Why? I asked. He looked at the floor. Because Daniel said Claire could lose everything. What did she have to lose? My sister had borrowed money. How much? Michael swallowed. Over $300,000. I stared at him. And Daniel was her creditor? Partly. So he had leverage over her. Yes. Then why didn't she come to me? Michael looked at me. Because she was ashamed. I almost believed that. Until he added. And because Daniel told her that if she couldn't pay, he could help her recover the money through Ethan's company. I felt sick. He told her that? Yes. How? Michael explained. Daniel had convinced Claire that because she was Ethan's biological mother, she might eventually gain enough legal influence to participate in decisions involving the company. If the company were sold, invested in, or restructured, there might be money available. Claire didn't understand the legal details. Daniel did. And that's where the manipulation began. Claire thought she was fighting for her son. Daniel was fighting for his money. And Michael had been caught somewhere in the middle. I looked at him. You helped them. Yes. You lied to me. Yes. You betrayed Ethan. Michael closed his eyes. Yes. Ethan had been silent the entire time. Then he asked. Did Mom know about the $8 million offer? Michael looked at him. I don't know. Ethan waited. Michael sighed. Yes. Ethan's jaw tightened. How? Daniel found out. When? Before the offer became public. Ethan looked at me. That explained everything. The sudden urgency. The legal petition. The bank request. The pressure. They knew the company might be worth much more than $3.2 million. And they wanted control before the sale could happen. But then Michael said something that changed everything. There's another person involved. I looked at him. Who? He hesitated. Claire's attorney. We know about him. No. Michael shook his head. Not the attorney you met. What? There's another attorney advising Daniel. Robert had mentioned legal strategy. But we didn't know there was a second lawyer. Michael gave us the name. Jonathan Reed. He was a corporate attorney who specialized in acquisitions. That explained the strategy. Daniel wasn't just trying to access Ethan's money. He wanted to position himself before the acquisition. If Ethan sold a controlling interest, Daniel wanted to be in a position to benefit. And Claire was supposed to create the opening. I looked at Michael. Why are you telling us this now? He looked at Ethan. Because Daniel threatened me. Ethan frowned. How? Michael pulled out his phone. He showed us several messages. Daniel had threatened to expose Michael's financial problems. Michael had debts too. Not nearly as large as Claire's. But enough to ruin him. I looked at the messages. Then I asked. Why should I believe you? You shouldn't. That answer surprised me. Michael continued. You shouldn't trust me. He looked at Ethan. But I'm giving you the information anyway. Ethan studied him. Then he said. Why? Michael's eyes filled with tears. Because I watched your mother leave you. He paused. And I watched you grow up without her. His voice broke. I told myself I was helping her. He looked at me. But the truth is, I was helping myself. Nobody spoke. Michael left 20 minutes later. This time, I didn't stop him. That night, Ethan and I sat in the kitchen. The house was quiet. You okay? I asked. No. I nodded. Me neither. He stared at his laptop. Grandma? Yes? Do you think Mom ever loved me? That question was harder than any legal document. I didn't want to lie. I think she loved you in the only way she knew how. He looked at me. That doesn't sound like love. Sometimes people can love someone and still hurt them. Then what good is love? I didn't have a perfect answer. So I told him the truth. Love isn't enough if there isn't responsibility. He nodded slowly. That night, Ethan made a decision. He wanted to meet Claire. Not alone. Not privately. With attorneys present. And he wanted to ask her questions. The meeting was scheduled for the following week. Claire arrived with her attorney. Ethan arrived with Robert. I sat behind him. Claire looked nervous. For the first few minutes, nobody spoke. Then Ethan opened his notebook. Why did you leave? Claire's eyes filled with tears. I was overwhelmed. You were overwhelmed for 11 years? She looked down. I made mistakes. Why did you come back? She hesitated. Because I realized I couldn't keep running. That's not the reason. Her attorney interrupted. Ethan? No, Ethan said. His voice remained calm. I want her to answer. Claire looked at him. Then she whispered. Because I heard you were doing well. Ethan stared at her. How well? She closed her eyes. I heard about the company. How? People told me. Who? She didn't answer. Daniel? Silence. Ethan nodded. That makes sense. Claire looked at him. I didn't come back for money. Then why did you ask for financial information? To protect you. Why did you tell the court you contributed money? You didn't contribute? Claire's face changed. Who told you that? Ethan looked at Robert. Then back at Claire. You've been lying. She started crying. I was trying to fix things. No. Ethan's voice became softer. You were trying to fix your life. Claire covered her mouth. The room was silent. Then Ethan asked the question I'd been afraid to hear. If I had never built Tracknest, would you have come back? Claire couldn't answer. And that silence was the answer. Ethan closed his notebook. I don't hate you. Claire looked at him. But I don't trust you. She began crying harder. I understand. No, Ethan said. I don't think you do. He stood. I spent 11 years thinking there was something wrong with me because you left. Claire stared at him. There wasn't. Ethan looked at her. I know that now. Then he walked out. I followed him. He didn't speak until we reached the car. Then he said, I thought seeing her would hurt more. Did it? He shook his head. It made things clearer. That was the moment I knew my grandson had changed. He wasn't waiting for his mother anymore. He was letting go of the version of her he had spent his childhood hoping would return. But we still had one problem. Daniel Mercer wasn't going to stop. And now he knew we had evidence. The next morning, Robert called me. Margaret, we have a problem. What happened? Daniel's attorney has sent a formal demand. For what? Access to the acquisition negotiations. I felt my stomach drop. On what grounds? None that appear valid. Then why? Robert was quiet. Because they're trying to force us into a mistake. What kind? They want Ethan to panic. I looked toward the stairs. Ethan was already awake. He was working. Calm. Focused. Then Robert said something else. They've also contacted the company that's considering the $8 million acquisition. My heart stopped. What did they tell them? That Ethan may not have clear authority to sell. I closed my eyes. That could destroy the deal. Or at least delay it. But Robert wasn't finished. They sent them documents claiming Claire has a financial interest in the company. I stared at the wall. They were attacking the deal. They were trying to make Ethan look legally unstable. If the buyer believed the ownership was disputed, they could walk away. And if the acquisition collapsed, Daniel would lose his leverage. That meant he was becoming desperate. I told Robert. What do we do? He answered calmly. We stop defending. What? We make them prove everything they've claimed. I didn't understand at first. Then he explained. Instead of trying to convince everyone that Claire was lying, we would let her claims be examined. Every financial statement. Every alleged contribution. Every document. Every signature. Every date. Every person involved. And if Claire had fabricated even one important part of her story, the entire structure could collapse. Ethan listened when I told him. Then he said, "Let them talk." I smiled. Exactly. For the next 2 weeks, we did nothing dramatic. That was the hardest part. We waited. We allowed Claire's attorneys to send documents. We answered through Robert. We didn't argue. We didn't threaten. We didn't accuse. We simply requested proof. And slowly, the cracks appeared. A bank statement didn't match. A date was wrong. A signature couldn't be verified. A supposed payment to Ethan had actually gone to Claire's credit card. Then another document contradicted an earlier statement. Then another. The more they produced, the more evidence they gave us. It was almost too easy. Almost. Because one afternoon, Robert called. His voice was different. Margaret, stop everything. What happened? I found something. What? A document Claire submitted that changes the entire case. What does it say? I can't explain it over the phone. I drove to his office. When I arrived, he placed a single page in front of me. I read it. Then I looked up. This isn't Claire's signature. No. Whose is it? Robert stared at me. That's the problem. Why? Because the signature appears to belong to Ethan. My heart stopped. Ethan was 16. He had never signed anything like this. But the document claimed he had authorized Claire to participate in the company's financial decisions. And if that signature could be made to look authentic, the consequences could be enormous. I looked at Robert. Can they prove he signed it? He shook his head. Not if we can prove he didn't. How? Robert pointed to the date. Because Ethan was somewhere else. I looked at the date. Then I remembered. That was the day Ethan had been on stage at a school competition. There were photographs. Videos. Teachers. Dozens of witnesses. The document said he had signed it at a private office 3 states away. He couldn't have been there. I almost smiled. They had made one mistake. A big one. And now, for the first time, we had something more powerful than anger. We had proof. But before we could use it, Ethan noticed one detail I had completely missed. The signature wasn't simply forged. It had been copied from something else. Something Ethan had signed months earlier. And whoever copied it had access to a document that only 4 people had ever seen. That meant the person who had created the fake authorization wasn't working from a random file. They had access to Ethan's private records. And suddenly, the mystery of the computer in our house had a much more frightening answer. Someone had been inside our home long before Michael and Daniel ever walked through the front door. And I knew exactly where I had seen that person before. The person I had seen before was Sarah Collins, Ethan's accountant. The same woman who had signed the consulting agreement with Daniel Mercer. The same woman who had claimed she didn't understand what she was signing. And now, apparently, someone had used information from Ethan's private files to create a document that could potentially give Claire influence over his company. I sat across from Robert, staring at the page. Sarah did this? We don't know yet, he said. But she had access. Yes. And she was paid by Daniel. Yes. Then what else do we need? Proof. That was the word I had learned to hate over the past few months. Proof. Not suspicion. Not instinct. Not what made sense. Proof. I took the document home. Ethan was waiting for me. He could tell immediately from my face that something had happened. What is it? I handed him the copy. He read it. His expression didn't change. Then he looked at the signature. That isn't mine. I know. He zoomed in on the image. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he opened his laptop. Give me a minute. He pulled up one of his old contracts. Then another. Then another. He placed them side by side. There. What? Look at the signature. I leaned closer. The signatures looked identical. But Ethan shook his head. This one is real. He pointed to the original. This one isn't. How can you tell? The pressure. I stared at him. He explained that when he signed documents, his handwriting changed slightly depending on whether he was writing quickly or carefully. The fake signature had the correct shape. But the wrong movement. Someone had copied what his signature looked like. They hadn't copied how he actually wrote it. Robert later confirmed that a forensic document examiner could potentially determine whether the signature was genuine. But we had a bigger question. Who had access to the original? Ethan made a list. Me. Robert. Sarah. Michael. His business attorney. And one other person. Claire. I stared at the list. Claire never had access to the original. Are you sure? Yes. Ethan shook his head. Maybe not directly. What do you mean? He opened an old email. It was from 8 months earlier. Claire had sent him a message asking for a copy of a document related to his business. Ethan had ignored it. But the attachment she requested was one of the documents containing his signature. I looked at him. Did you send it? No. Then how did she know it existed? He didn't answer. We checked the email headers. The message had been forwarded from another account. The original sender was hidden behind a business address. But the domain belonged to a company connected to Daniel. That was the first direct link between Claire and the documents. Still, we needed more. We didn't accuse Sarah. We didn't confront Michael. We didn't contact Claire. Instead, Robert suggested something I hadn't expected. We let them believe they still have access. What? He leaned back. Not real access. I understood. We would create controlled information. Documents that looked valuable but contained harmless details. If those documents later appeared in someone else's possession, we'd know where the leak was coming from. Ethan liked the idea. He called it a canary. I called it clever. We prepared 3 different harmless documents. One went through Sarah. One was accessible to Michael. One was kept only within Ethan's legal team. Each contained a different false detail. Nothing damaging. Nothing that could hurt the company. But enough to identify the source. Then we waited. 3 days. Nothing. 5 days. Nothing. 7 days. Still nothing. I started wondering whether we'd made a mistake. Then Ethan received an email from Claire. She wrote, I heard the acquisition offer may be delayed. I looked at Ethan. He hadn't told Claire. Robert hadn't told Claire. Only one of the 3 controlled documents mentioned a delay. The version given to Sarah. My stomach dropped. Ethan looked at me. It's Sarah. We didn't confront her immediately. Robert wanted one more piece of evidence. He contacted the company handling the acquisition. They confirmed that someone had recently asked questions about the status of the offer. The person had identified themselves as an authorized representative of Ethan's financial team. The email address used wasn't Sarah's, but the wording matched one of her previous communications. We had enough to move forward. Sarah was called into Robert's office. She arrived alone. This time, she wasn't carrying a handbag full of documents. She was carrying nothing. She sat down. Robert placed the control document in front of her. This information was never public. Sarah stared at it. I don't understand. We know you shared it. Her face changed. I didn't. Robert slid another page toward her. It contained the email Claire had sent Ethan. The line about the acquisition being delayed was highlighted. Sarah looked at it. Then she looked at me. I didn't mean for this to happen. My heart sank. That sentence was almost an admission. You gave Daniel information, I said. She started crying. I didn't know what he was going to do with it. You signed an agreement with him. I needed the money. How much? 20,000. And then? She wiped her eyes. He offered me more. How much? 50. I stared at her. $50,000? She nodded. For what? Information. Ethan was sitting beside me. He asked. What information? Sarah looked at him. Your contracts. Why? He wanted to know Hitch clients were likely to renew. And my financial records? Yes. And my acquisition offer? Yes. Why? She started crying again. Because Daniel said if the acquisition went through, there would be enough money to solve everything. I felt anger rise. Everything? His debts. Claire's debts? Yes. And yours? Sarah looked down. Yes. That was the moment I understood. Everyone involved had their own reason. Claire wanted financial security. Daniel wanted to recover his losses. Michael wanted to escape his own debts and believed he was helping his family. Sarah wanted money. And all of them had looked at Ethan and seen an opportunity. Not a 16-year-old boy. Not a grandson. Not a human being. An opportunity. Ethan looked at Sarah. Did you make the fake document? She shook her head. No. Who did? I don't know. You have to know. I don't. Who asked you for my signature? Sarah hesitated. Then she whispered. Jonathan Reed. The second attorney. The corporate lawyer connected to Daniel. I looked at Robert. He nodded. That was enough. We had a chain now. Sarah had shared the documents. Jonathan had access to them. Daniel had the motive. Claire had the legal petition. And someone had created a fake authorization. But we still didn't know who had actually signed Claire's name. Then Sarah said something unexpected. There's something else. What? Daniel has a file. What kind of file? Everything. I frowned. What do you mean? He keeps copies of everything. Everything about Ethan? Yes. Where? I don't know. Sarah. She looked at me. I've seen it once. Where? In his office. What's in it? She swallowed. Your family. I felt cold. What about us? Your finances. Mine? Ethan's. Claire's. Michael's. She paused. And your husband. My heart stopped. Daniel has information about Daniel? No. My husband. Sarah nodded. Old records. What kind? I don't know. I looked at her. Why would Daniel have my husband's records? She shook her head. I don't know. But suddenly, something from 11 years earlier came back to me. After Daniel died, I had spent months dealing with insurance companies. There had been a life insurance policy, a retirement account, a small investment portfolio. Nothing extraordinary. But there had been one account I never fully understood. Daniel had received a large transfer shortly before his death. I had never found out where it came from. At the time, I assumed it was part of his work. I had been grieving. I hadn't investigated. Now I wondered. Sarah, I said slowly. Do you know if Daniel Mercer had anything to do with my husband's finances? She looked frightened. I don't know. Think. She hesitated. Then said. I saw his name in the file. My heart started Ding. Whose name? Your husband's. I couldn't breathe properly. Robert noticed. Margaret? I stood. I need to go home. Ethan looked at me. Grandma? I need to find something. We drove home in silence. I went straight to the attic. I hadn't opened the old boxes in years. Ethan followed. What's there? Your grandfather's financial records. We opened boxes. Tax documents. Insurance paperwork. Old bank statements. Letters. I searched for the account. Nothing. Then Ethan noticed a small envelope taped to the bottom of a box. What's that? I pulled it free. There was no name. No date. Just an account number. I opened it. Inside was a single statement. The account belonged to Daniel. The statement showed a transfer made 6 weeks before his death. The amount was $180,000. The sender was a company I didn't recognize. Ethan searched the company name. His face changed. What? He turned the laptop toward me. The company had been dissolved years ago. But its former director was listed in an old business record. Daniel Mercer. I sat down on the attic floor. My husband had received $180,000 from a company connected to the same man who was now trying to control my grandson's business. But why? And why had Daniel Mercer never mentioned it? Ethan searched deeper. He found another connection. The company had been involved in a failed investment project 11 years earlier. The exact year my husband died. I felt sick. Grandma. I know. Maybe Grandpa knew him. Maybe. Maybe that's why he had the money. I stared at the statement. Then something occurred to me. What if the money wasn't for your grandfather? Ethan looked at me. What do you mean? What if someone paid him to do something? The thought sounded absurd. My husband had been honest. Kind. Reliable. But people could have secrets. Even good people. I didn't want to believe it. So I decided we needed facts. Robert reviewed the documents that evening. He was careful. He didn't make accusations. But he agreed there was enough to investigate. Then he found another document. A corporate filing. The dissolved company had once been involved in a dispute. One of the parties was Daniel Mercer. The other was a small technology company. A company that had been developing inventory software. I stared at the page. Ethan. He looked. That's the same industry. Robert nodded. That's what concerns me. Ethan's face went pale. You think Daniel has been doing this for years? It's possible, Robert said. Maybe TrackNest wasn't the first company he tried to get involved with. I looked at my grandson. Maybe it wasn't. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my husband. About the $180,000. About Daniel. About Claire. About the timing. And then I remembered meeting Daniel had said years ago. At my husband's funeral, he had stood beside me. He had squeezed my shoulder. And he'd said, "Sometimes, Margaret, the people we love leave things unfinished." At the time, I thought he meant grief. Now I wasn't sure. The next morning, I called an old colleague of my husband's. His name was Frank Miller. He had worked with Daniel for years. Frank agreed to meet me. When I showed him the bank statement, his face went white. "Where did you get this?" "It belonged to my husband." Frank looked around the restaurant. "Margaret, you need to be careful." "Why?" "Because Daniel wasn't always honest." I leaned forward. "What do you know?" Frank lowered his voice. "Your husband discovered something." "What?" "A financial scheme." My heart stopped. "What kind?" "I don't know all of it." "But you knew?" Daniel and another partner were moving money through shell companies. "Was my husband involved?" Frank shook his head. "No. He was trying to expose it." I felt dizzy. Then why did he receive $180,000? Frank stared at me. "That wasn't payment." "What was it?" "A settlement." "For what?" "I don't know." "Frank." He sighed. "Your husband was going to report them." I stared at him. "Who?" "Daniel." The restaurant suddenly felt too loud. People were laughing nearby. Plates were clinking. A waiter walked past our table. And I could barely hear any of it. "Why didn't Daniel go to prison?" Frank shook his head. "Because your husband died." I froze. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the investigation stopped." "Why?" "I don't know." He hesitated. Then said, "Maybe because there was no one left to push it." I drove home without speaking. Ethan was waiting. He looked at me. "What did you find?" I told him. He listened. Then he said something that frightened me. "Grandma, what if Grandpa's death wasn't what we thought?" I stared at him. "No." "What if?" "No." I didn't want to hear it. Not yet. We had no proof. Only questions. And I wasn't going to turn my husband's death into a conspiracy because of a suspicious bank transfer. But then my phone rang. It was Sarah. She was crying. "Margaret, I forgot something." "What?" "Daniel's file." "What about it?" "There was a photograph." "Of what?" She took a breath. "Your husband." My heart stopped. "Where was the photograph taken?" "I don't know." "What was he doing?" "He was standing beside Daniel." "When?" Sarah's voice dropped. 3 days before he died. I couldn't speak. Then she said, "Margaret, there's something written on the back." "What?" She whispered. "He knows about Ethan." The line went silent. I stared at my phone. Ethan had been born months after that photograph. How could my husband have known anything about him? Unless the photograph wasn't about Ethan. Unless the message meant something else. Something none of us understood yet. And suddenly, the story I thought began with Claire abandoning her son 11 years ago looked much older. Much darker. Because perhaps Claire hadn't been the first person to come looking for Ethan's future. Perhaps someone had been watching our family long before Ethan ever built TrackNest. And if Daniel Mercer had really been connected to my husband's final days, then this wasn't just about revenge against a greedy mother anymore. It was about uncovering a truth my family had buried for 11 years. And I was beginning to fear that the truth had been waiting for us all along. I didn't tell Ethan about the photograph immediately. Not because I wanted to hide it from him. Because I needed to understand what I was looking at before I put another piece of his grandfather's death into his head. I had already spent years protecting him from the ugliest parts of our family. Now I was starting to wonder whether protecting him had also kept me blind. That afternoon, I drove to Frank Miller's house. He opened the door wearing an old gray sweater and looked at me for a long moment. "You found something else," he said. I nodded. "About my husband." Frank stepped aside. "Come in." His house smelled like coffee and old books. He led me into the kitchen, but neither of us sat down. I showed him the photograph Sarah had described. Frank stared at it. His face changed. "You recognize it?" "Yes." "When was this taken?" 3 days before my husband died." Frank slowly lowered the photograph. "Where did you get this?" "Daniel's file." He looked at me. "I was afraid of that." "Afraid of what?" Frank walked to a cabinet and pulled out a folder. He hesitated before opening it. Inside were old papers. Very old. He removed a photograph. Then placed it beside mine. It was taken in the same office. Same room. Same conference table. My husband was there again. So was Daniel. And a third man. I recognized him immediately. Jonathan Reed. The attorney who was now helping Daniel challenge Ethan's ownership. I stared at the photograph. "That's impossible." Frank shook his head. "No." "Jonathan was involved 11 years ago?" "Yes." "Doing what?" "Legal work." "For Daniel?" "For the company." I looked at the two photographs. Something didn't make sense. Jonathan had been connected to Daniel then. And now, 11 years later, he was involved in the exact same strategy around Ethan. I felt a chill move through me. "Frank, what happened 3 days after this photograph?" He looked at me. "Your husband died." "I know." "No, Margaret." His voice softened. "You know what happened medically." "I'm talking about what happened before." I waited. "Your husband had a meeting scheduled." "With Daniel?" "Yes." "What time?" 6:30 in the evening. "Did they meet?" Frank shook his head. "Not officially." "What does that mean?" "Your husband never showed up." "Why?" "We don't know." I stared at him. "Did anyone call him?" "Duh." "Neil did." "When?" "Several times." "Did my husband answer?" "Once." "What did he say?" Frank looked uncomfortable. "He told Daniel he wasn't coming." "Why?" "I don't know." I stepped closer. "You do know something." Frank looked down. "Finally," he said. "Your husband told me he was afraid." My breath caught. My husband wasn't afraid of people. I know. What was he afraid of? Frank looked at the photograph. He said someone had found out about Ethan. I couldn't move. What? He said there was information about your grandson that should never have been known. I whispered. Ethan wasn't even born. Frank nodded. That was what made no sense. I sat down. The room suddenly felt too small. What exactly did he say? Frank thought for a moment. He said, if they know about the baby, they know about Claire. I stared at him. What baby? Your daughter was pregnant. I felt the blood drain from my face. Frank looked confused. You didn't know? No. My husband never told me. Frank sat across from me. Margaret, Claire was pregnant before she disappeared. I shook my head. No. She was. When? Shortly before your husband's death. I stood. You're saying my husband knew Claire was pregnant? Yes. Why didn't he tell me? I don't know. Did Claire know he knew? I don't know. My mind raced. 11 years ago, Claire had disappeared after a family argument. I had always believed she left because she was angry. Because she wanted a different life. Because she didn't want responsibility. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if she had been frightened? What if someone had been pressuring her? What if my husband had discovered something about the pregnancy? And what if Daniel had known too? I looked at Frank. Did my husband know Ethan was his grandson? Frank nodded. Yes. Before he died? Yes. How? He had met Claire. When? Several times. I closed my eyes. All these years, I had believed my husband had never known about Ethan. But he had. And he had kept it from me. Why? Frank reached for another document. This might explain it. It was an old letter. The handwriting was my husband's. I recognized it immediately. The letter was addressed to someone named David. I read it. David. If anything happens to me, don't give this information to Margaret until Ethan is old enough to understand it. Claire is not the problem. She is being pressured. I don't know who is behind it yet. But Daniel knows more than he admits. I stopped reading. My hands began shaking. Who is David? Frank looked at me. David Whitmore. My husband's brother? Yes. Michael's father? Frank nodded. I stared at the letter. Michael had told me he didn't know everything. But perhaps he had known more than he admitted. I asked. Frank. Where is David now? He died years ago. Did he leave anything? I don't know. I looked at the letter again. Then I remembered something. After my husband's funeral, his brother David had given me a small wooden box. He had said, John wanted you to have this eventually. Eventually. I had forgotten about it. Because I had moved houses twice. Because life had continued. Because grief makes you put things away simply so you can breathe. I drove home. I went straight to the garage. I searched through old storage boxes for nearly an hour. Then I found it. A small wooden box. Still locked. I had never opened it. I had never even found the key. Ethan came into the garage. What are you doing? I looked at him. I found something that belonged to your grandfather. He saw the box. What's inside? I don't know. Can we open it? I hesitated. Then nodded. We searched the house for the key. Nothing. Finally, Ethan noticed a tiny metal object taped beneath the lid. A key. He smiled. Grandpa was dramatic. Despite everything, I laughed. Apparently. The key turned. The box opened. Inside were 3 things. A USB drive. A folded photograph. And a sealed envelope. The envelope had my name on it. My hands were shaking before I even opened it. The letter began. Margaret, if you're reading this, then I failed to keep you safe from the truth. I stopped. Ethan looked at me. Grandma? I continued. I need you to know that I never abandoned Claire. I was trying to protect her. My heart pounded. The letter explained that Claire had become involved with someone connected to Daniel's business network. Not romantically. Financially. She had unknowingly signed paperwork that could have placed her in serious debt. My husband discovered it. He tried to help her. But when he confronted Daniel, Daniel threatened him. Then came the sentence that changed everything. Daniel knows about the child. I looked at Ethan. The child. Him. My husband had known. He continued. I don't believe Daniel wants the baby. I believe he wants access to whatever the baby may eventually inherit. I couldn't breathe. There was more. If I die before I can explain this, do not confront Daniel. Do not trust anyone connected to him. Especially not Jonathan Reed. My eyes moved down the page. Then I saw a name. David knows where the records are. David. Michael's father. The same man who had given me the wooden box. I turned to the USB drive. Maybe that's where the records are. Ethan connected it to his laptop. The drive was password protected. He looked at me. Do you know the password? I shook my head. He tried dates. Birthdays. Family names. Nothing worked. Then he looked at the letter. What if it's not a date? What do you mean? Grandpa wrote that the truth was supposed to reach me when I was old enough. He looked at the box. Maybe the password is something he wanted me to know. He tried Ethan's full name. Nothing. Then he tried Claire's. Nothing. Finally, he entered one word. Family. The drive opened. I stared at him. How did you know? I didn't. He clicked the first folder. There were dozens of files. Bank statements. Emails. Contracts. Photographs. And one video. Dated 11 years earlier. My husband appeared on screen. Alive. Sitting behind a desk. I covered my mouth. Ethan stared at the screen. My husband looked tired. But focused. He began speaking. If you're watching this, I didn't get the chance to explain. I felt tears fill my eyes. He continued. Margaret, I am sorry. I couldn't look away. I didn't tell you because I thought silence would keep you safe. He paused. Claire is being manipulated. Then he said something I had never expected. Daniel isn't trying to get Claire's money. He leaned closer to the camera. He's trying to get control of Ethan's future. The room went silent. My husband continued. I don't know exactly how yet. But I found documents suggesting Daniel has been tracking our family finances for years. Ethan's face became pale. Grandma. I put my hand on his arm. Keep watching. My husband's voice became quieter. If anything happens to me, don't assume my death was connected to this. I don't want you to make accusations without proof. He paused. Then. But if Daniel ever comes back into Ethan's life, understand this. My husband's eyes looked directly into the camera. He won't be coming back because of Claire. He swallowed. He'll be coming because of the money. The video ended. I sat frozen. For 11 years, I had thought my husband died in a tragic accident. Now I had a video recorded days before his death warning me about the same man who was trying to take control of my grandson's company. But the worst discovery wasn't the video. It was the next file. A scanned insurance document. My husband's life insurance policy had a beneficiary. I had always believed I was the sole beneficiary. I wasn't. There was another name. Ethan Whitmore. I stared at the document. Ethan was the beneficiary of a portion of the policy. But Ethan hadn't been born yet. That meant the policy had been changed before his birth. I looked at the date. 6 weeks before my husband's death. The same period as the $180,000 transfer. The same period when Daniel and my husband were meeting. I whispered. He knew. Ethan looked at me. Who? Your grandfather. He had known Ethan was coming. He had changed his life insurance. He had created records. He had left instructions. He had expected something to happen. But why? Then Ethan noticed another file. Grandma. I looked at him. This one has today's date. I frowned. That can't be. He clicked it. The file wasn't actually created today. It had been modified recently. Someone had accessed the old archive. The timestamp was from 3 days earlier. 3 days. The same day Sarah first admitted Daniel had been asking for information. Someone had accessed my husband's hidden records after we began investigating. Ethan checked the metadata. The account used to access the archive belonged to a person who shouldn't have known the password. Michael. I felt the room go cold. No. Ethan stared at the screen. Uncle Mike accessed Grandpa's files. I didn't want to believe it. Michael had confessed to helping Daniel. But perhaps he had been lying about how much he knew. I called him. He didn't answer. I called again. Nothing. Then my phone buzzed. A message. From Michael. Don't trust Sarah. I stared at the screen. Then another message appeared. And whatever you found in Grandpa's box, don't show it to Robert. I felt my heart stop. Ethan looked at me. Why would he say that? I didn't know. Then a third message arrived. Robert isn't who you think he is. I looked at Ethan. Neither of us spoke. Because there was only one question left. If Michael was telling the truth, why had Robert spent months helping us? And if Michael was lying, why would he suddenly warn us about him? For the first time since this nightmare began, I couldn't tell which side anyone was on. And that was exactly what made the next discovery so dangerous. Because when I opened the final file on the USB drive, I found a photograph of Robert standing beside Daniel Mercer. Taken 11 years ago. And my husband's handwriting was written across the back. If Robert ever gets involved, assume the plan has started again. For several seconds, I couldn't even breathe. I kept staring at the photograph. Robert. Daniel. My husband. 11 years ago. And beneath them, in my husband's handwriting. If Robert ever gets involved, assume the plan has started again. Ethan was standing beside me. Grandma? I couldn't answer. Grandma, what does that mean? I don't know. It was the first time I'd said those words and actually meant them. I had trusted Robert. More than anyone. He had helped us when Claire filed against Ethan. He had reviewed the contracts. He had found the financial inconsistencies. He had warned us about Daniel. He had told us to document everything. He had even helped uncover Sarah's involvement. If Robert was part of this, then we hadn't been fighting the people responsible. We had been following instructions from one of them. Ethan reached for the laptop. Let's check the photograph. What do you mean? The metadata. He opened the image information. There wasn't much. But the file had been scanned from an older photograph. The original date was printed on the back. October 14, 2015. I stared at it. That was 6 days before your grandfather died. Ethan looked at me. Why would Grandpa take a picture with Robert? I don't know. Was Robert his lawyer? No. Then why? That question stayed with me. I remembered Robert telling me he had known my husband professionally. He had said they had crossed paths through business. Nothing more. But now I wondered if that had been another carefully chosen half-truth. I closed the laptop. We need to leave. Where? Somewhere Robert can't find us. Ethan looked toward the window. Do you think we're in danger? I wanted to say no. I couldn't. Maybe. He nodded. He didn't panic. That frightened me more than if he had. He had learned too quickly how to live with fear. We packed only what we needed. Phones. Documents. The USB drive. The wooden box. 2 laptops. Then I remembered something. The original photograph. I put it inside my purse. We drove to a small hotel about 40 minutes away. I didn't tell anyone where we were going. Not Michael. Not Sarah. Not Robert. Especially not Robert. Once we were inside the room, Ethan locked the door. Then he looked at me. Who do we trust? I sat on the edge of the bed. I don't know. He thought for a moment. Frank? I nodded. Maybe. Sarah? Not yet. Michael? I don't know. And Robert? No. Ethan looked at me. You trusted him. Yes. Why? Because he helped us. He stared at me. That's what makes it scary. He was right. The most dangerous person isn't always the one standing across the room threatening you. Sometimes it's the person sitting beside you telling you they're protecting you. I called Frank. He answered immediately. Margaret? Are you alone? Yes. Don't tell anyone where I am. There was a pause. What's happened? I found something. What? Robert. Silence. Then Frank whispered. Oh God. My stomach dropped. You know. I know enough. Tell me. Frank exhaled slowly. Your husband didn't trust Robert. Why? Because Robert worked with Daniel. My hands tightened around the phone. You told me Robert was only a business contact. I thought he was. No. Frank sounded shaken. Margaret, I need to explain something. Please do. Your husband discovered that Robert had been helping Daniel structure investments. Illegal investments? I don't know. Frank. I don't know enough to say that. What happened? Your husband confronted him. When? About a week before he died. I closed my eyes. Did Robert threaten him? I wasn't there. But you knew about the confrontation. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because your husband told me not to. I almost laughed. Everyone seemed to have been given instructions except me. Frank continued. Your husband said if anything happened, you were supposed to stay away from Daniel and Robert. Then why did Robert find me? I don't know. I looked at Ethan. He was listening. Frank, who is David? Michael's father? Yes. He knew about the situation. Did he know Robert? Yes. How well? Very well. I felt another piece fall into place. Did David ever work with Robert? Yes. Doing what? Frank hesitated. Your husband's estate. I frowned. My husband's estate? After his death, David helped handle some of the paperwork. I looked at the wooden box. Did David know about Ethan? Yes. Did Michael? Another pause. Yes. I closed my eyes. Michael had known. Maybe for years. Then why had he allowed Claire and Daniel to come after Ethan? Because perhaps Michael wasn't simply helping them. Perhaps he was trying to get something for himself. Or perhaps he had been trapped too. I asked Frank one final question. Where is David's old office? Frank gave me an address. Then he said, Margaret, don't go there alone. I won't. Take someone you trust. I almost smiled. That's the problem. I hung up. Ethan looked at me. David's office? Yes. Let's go. We drove there the next morning. The building was old. The office had been vacant for years. A faded sign still hung near the entrance. Whitmore and Associates. My husband's family business. I hadn't been there since before he died. Inside, dust covered everything. Old filing cabinets. Broken chairs. Boxes stacked against walls. Ethan walked slowly through the hallway. This place feels like a museum. It feels like a grave. We searched the office. Nothing. Then Ethan noticed a loose floorboard beneath an old desk. He knelt. There. He pulled it up. Underneath was a metal box. No lock. Inside were folders. And one handwritten notebook. My husband's handwriting again. I opened it. Most of the pages were financial notes. Names. Dates. Amounts. Then I reached the final section. There was a heading. The 4 people I don't trust. Under it were 4 names. Daniel Mercer. Jonathan Reed. Robert Hayes. And Michael Whitmore. I stared at the 4th name. Michael. My husband's own nephew. Ethan read over my shoulder. Uncle Mike. I nodded. Why would Grandpa distrust him? The notebook explained some of it. Michael had been struggling financially even then. He had borrowed money from Daniel. He had also asked my husband for help. My husband refused because he believed Michael was becoming involved in something dangerous. Then came a sentence that made my heart stop. Michael knows Claire is pregnant. I sat down. He knew before Ethan was born. Ethan looked at me. So everyone knew. Not everyone. But Grandpa knew. David knew. Michael knew. Daniel knew. Yes. And you didn't? No. He looked angry. Why didn't Grandpa tell you? I don't know. Then Ethan turned the page. There was an answer. My husband had written. Margaret will protect the baby at any cost. That is exactly why she must know. Know yet. I stared at the sentence. He had been trying to protect me. But from what? The next page explained. Daniel had discovered that my husband's company had a small trust structure connected to future family assets. It wasn't worth millions. Not even close. But it contained something important. A controlling interest in a small technology patent portfolio. My husband believed those patents could become valuable in the future. He had placed part of the interest into a trust for Ethan. Ethan hadn't known. I hadn't known. And Daniel had been trying to reach it. I looked at Ethan. This is what they wanted. He frowned. But TrackNest wasn't even around then. Exactly. So Daniel wasn't after TrackNest originally. No. He was after something older. Something my husband had protected for Ethan before Ethan could even understand what ownership meant. Then we found the next page. My husband's handwriting became darker. Daniel believes the trust can be challenged if Claire establishes herself as Ethan's primary legal guardian or financial representative. I felt sick. That explained Claire's entire strategy. The company was only the visible target. The real target was Ethan's protected assets. And TrackNest had simply made everything more valuable. But there was another problem. The trust documents were missing. I searched the box. Nothing. Ethan searched every folder. Nothing. Then he noticed a reference in the notebook. Original trust documents, RH. He looked at me. RH. Robert Hayes. We both went silent. Robert had the original documents. Or had known where they were. That meant his involvement wasn't new. It went back 11 years. I suddenly understood why Robert had been so effective. He knew exactly what we were looking for. Because he had known what was hidden from the beginning. My phone rang. Robert. I stared at the screen. Ethan whispered. Don't answer. I didn't. The call ended. Then a message arrived. Margaret, I know you found the box. We need to talk before you make a serious mistake. I showed Ethan. He looked at me. How does he know? I didn't answer. A second message appeared. You are not in danger from me. But you are in danger if you keep trusting Frank. I froze. Frank. The one person we'd just called. The one person who had confirmed everything. Ethan stared at the message. This is impossible. Unless. Unless what? Unless Robert has been watching us. Ethan checked his phone. Then mine. Nothing obvious. But when he opened the hotel's Wi-Fi settings, he noticed a device connected to the network. A device with no recognizable name. He stared at it. Grandma. What? This isn't ours. We immediately disconnected. Then we packed again. We drove without choosing a destination. For the next hour, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ethan said. Maybe we should go to the police. I considered it. But what would we tell them? We had suspicious documents. Old financial records. A forged signature. A photograph. A possible conspiracy. But no evidence that anyone was physically threatening us. We needed something stronger. Something undeniable. Then Ethan said. What about the trust? What about it? If Robert has the original documents, maybe he can't hide them forever. I looked at him. What are you thinking? Make him show us. How? He smiled. It was the first time I'd seen that expression in weeks. Not fear. Not anger. Strategy. We tell him we already have the documents. I understood immediately. A trap. We called Robert. This time, I answered. Margaret. You knew. He was silent. You knew about Ethan's trust. Yes. You knew about my husband. Yes. You knew Daniel was involved. Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because you wouldn't have been able to protect Ethan if you knew everything. I felt anger rise. You don't get to decide that. I did what your husband asked me to do. What exactly did he ask? To protect the trust. From Daniel? Yes. From Robert? Silence. I almost smiled. You understand why I don't trust you. I do. Then tell me where the original trust documents are. I can't. Why? Because they aren't safe with me anymore. My heart skipped. Where are they? He hesitated. Margaret, listen carefully. I am. Your husband created a second set of instructions. What instructions? If anything happened to him, the trust would remain protected unless Ethan reached 18. He's 16. Yes. Then what happens when he turns 18? Robert's voice became quieter. The trust becomes his. I stared at Ethan. That explained the timing. Claire was running out of time. Daniel was running out of time. Everyone was. Then Robert said. But there's a problem. What? The trust has already been challenged. By whom? He didn't answer. Robert. By Ethan's mother. My stomach dropped. Claire filed a claim against the trust? Yes. When? 3 months ago. 3 months. Before she contacted me. Before the first email. Before everything. She had already started the legal process. Then Robert said something I never expected. The court hearing is in 12 days. I closed my eyes. 12 days. Ethan would be 17 soon. If Claire succeeded, she could potentially gain influence over the trust before Ethan reached 18. That explained the rush. That explained Daniel. That explained everything. But then Robert added. There's one thing Claire doesn't know. What? The trust contains more than money. I frowned. What does that mean? It contains evidence. Evidence of what? Your husband's investigation. I felt the blood, Leah. V.e. my face. The original records? Yes. Then why didn't you tell me? Because if Daniel learned where they were, he'd destroy them. Where are they? Robert was silent. Then he said. Your husband gave them to someone he trusted. I waited. Who? Robert answered. David. My heart stopped. David is dead. I know. Then where are the records? I don't know. I almost laughed. You're telling me you helped protect something for 11 years, and you don't know where it is? I know where David left them. Where? Robert hesitated. Then he said. In your house. I looked around. My house. The house where Ethan had grown up. The house where Claire had once lived. The house where my husband had died. The house we had searched countless times. Where? Robert said. Your husband's study. I felt a chill. The study had been untouched for 11 years. I had locked it after his death. I had never allowed anyone to renovate it. Not even Ethan. Robert continued. There is a false wall behind the bookshelf. I stared at Ethan. He stared back. There's one more thing, Robert said. What? The wall wasn't built by your husband. My heart began pounding. Who built it? Robert whispered. Michael. The line went dead. I looked at Ethan. Neither of us moved. Then, slowly, we both understood. Michael hadn't just known about the trust. He had helped hide it. Which meant he might know exactly where the evidence was. And if he had helped hide it 11 years ago, there was only one reason he was warning us now. Someone had discovered where it was. We drove home before sunset. I unlocked the front door. The house was silent. Too silent. We walked toward my husband's old study. The door was still locked. I hadn't opened it in years. I found the key. It turned with a click. Dust filled the air as the door opened. Everything looked exactly as I remembered. His desk. His chair. The old bookshelf. The framed photograph of our family. Ethan walked toward the bookshelf. Which one? I don't know. We searched. Nothing. Then Ethan noticed a small scratch on the floor. He moved the bookshelf slightly. Behind it was a narrow section of wall. He touched it. A panel moved. My heart stopped. There was a small metal compartment hidden behind it. Inside was a black folder. And on the folder was one sentence. Written in my husband's handwriting. For Ethan, open only when they come back. I reached for it. Then we heard footsteps behind us. I turned. Michael stood in the doorway. His face was pale. He looked at the folder. Then at Ethan. And he whispered, "Don't open that." Michael stood in the doorway. His eyes were fixed on the black folder. Not Ethan. Not me. The folder. That was enough. I pulled it toward myself. Why shouldn't I open it? Michael swallowed. Because you don't understand what's inside. Then explain it. I can't. You've been saying that for years. He stepped into the room. Margaret, please. Ethan moved between us. No. Michael stopped. Ethan's voice was calm. Tell us the truth. Michael looked at him. You deserve it. Then tell me. Michael glanced toward the folder. Your grandfather didn't trust the people around him. We know. He didn't trust me either. We know that too. Michael looked hurt. I deserved that. I kept my hand on the folder. What did your father know? Michael's face tightened. More than I did. Did he hide this? Yes. Why? Because your grandfather asked him to. Why? Michael sat down in the old chair. For a moment, he looked much older than he had that afternoon at my dining table. Because Daniel was getting closer. To what? To the trust. I looked at the folder. What is in it? Proof. Proof of what? Michael looked at Ethan. Why your grandfather died. The room went silent. I felt my knees weaken. You said you didn't know if his death was connected. I didn't. Then why are you saying this now? Because I finally saw the rest of the documents. When? Yesterday. Where? Michael looked away. Daniel has copies. My stomach dropped. How? I don't know. Michael. I swear. Ethan stepped forward. Why did you help him? Michael closed his eyes. Because I was afraid. Of Daniel? Yes. Why? Because he knew what I had done. What did you do? Michael looked at me. I gave him information. I already knew that. But he continued. Not just about you. What else? About your husband. I felt something break inside me. What did you tell him? That John was investigating him. Michael's voice shook. I thought Daniel would scare him. You thought? I didn't know he'd go further. I stared at him. What happened? Michael looked at the floor. Your husband confronted Daniel. We know. No. He shook his head. You don't know what happened afterward. I waited. John met Daniel that night. Which night? 3 days before he died. My heart began racing. What happened? They argued. About the money? No. About Claire? No. Then what? Michael looked at Ethan. About you. Ethan's face changed. Me? You hadn't been born yet. I know. Michael nodded. Your grandfather knew your mother was pregnant. What did Daniel want? Michael hesitated. He wanted John to sign something. What? Control. Of what? The trust. I looked at Ethan. Michael continued. Daniel knew that once you were born, your grandfather intended to transfer the assets into your name. Why? Because John believed Daniel would eventually try to take them. Ethan looked confused. Why would he care about me? Because you were the beneficiary. Michael paused. And because your grandfather had discovered what Daniel had been doing with other families. My skin went cold. Other families? Michael nodded. Daniel wasn't doing this for the first time. I looked at the folder. Then why didn't the police find anything? Because there wasn't enough evidence. Your grandfather had evidence. Yes. Then why didn't he use it? Because he was afraid. Of what? Michael looked directly at me. Of what would happen to Claire. I froze. What? Daniel had information about her. What kind? Financial records. Old debts. Things she had done. Was he blackmailing her? Michael nodded. He threatened to expose her. I shook my head. So Claire was trapped. Yes. Then why did she leave Ethan? Michael's face tightened. She believed she was protecting him. I stared at him. Protecting him? Yes. By abandoning him? She thought Daniel would leave him alone if she disappeared. I didn't know what to say. For 11 years, I had hated Claire for walking away. Now, for the first time, I wondered if some part of her had been terrified. That didn't excuse what she had done. It didn't erase the years Ethan had spent without his mother. But it changed the shape of the betrayal. Did Claire know what Daniel wanted? Michael nodded. She knew enough. Did she know about the trust? Yes. Did she know Ethan would eventually control it? Yes. And she still came back? Michael looked at me. Because Daniel told her that if she didn't cooperate, he'd destroy her. Ethan sat down. He looked overwhelmed. Why didn't anyone tell me? Michael answered softly. Because your grandfather wanted you to have a childhood. Ethan laughed bitterly. I didn't have a normal childhood anyway. I know. No, you don't. Michael looked down. You're right. Ethan stared at him. You all knew things about me. Yes. You all made decisions for me. Yes. You watched Grandma raise me while you knew there was some secret trust. Michael nodded. Yes. Ethan stood. Then none of you protected me. Michael didn't argue. He simply said, no. That honesty seemed to hit Ethan harder than another lie would have. I reached for his hand. He took it. Then I looked at Michael. What's in the folder? He shook his head. You need to understand something first. What? Once you open it, there is no going back. I almost smiled. Michael, we've been living with the consequences of this for 11 years. He looked at me. You still don't understand. Then make me understand. He stood. The folder doesn't just contain information about Daniel. What else? It contains the reason Claire disappeared. I felt Ethan's fingers tighten around mine. Why did she disappear? Michael looked at him. Because she was given a choice. What choice? Leave Ethan and stay alive. He paused. Or stay and risk everyone. The room became silent. Ethan whispered. She chose to leave. Michael nodded. She thought it was the only way. I looked at the folder. What happened to my husband? Michael didn't answer. Michael. He closed his eyes. John found out Daniel was planning to kill the trust. Kill the trust? Make it disappear. How? Through debt. I didn't understand. Michael explained. Daniel had been using complicated financial arrangements to create liabilities around family trusts. If a beneficiary became entangled in the wrong debt or legal dispute, control could shift. The goal wasn't always to steal money directly. Sometimes the goal was to make ownership too complicated to defend. It was slow, legal-looking, expensive, and incredibly difficult to prove. That was why Daniel had targeted Ethan's company. The business wasn't just valuable. It created leverage. If Ethan became involved in litigation, the acquisition could be delayed. If the company was challenged, investors could walk away. If Ethan needed money for legal defense, someone could offer help. And eventually, that person could demand control. I looked at Michael. So Daniel wanted Ethan trapped. Yes. And Claire was supposed to help. Yes. And Robert? Michael hesitated. Robert was supposed to make the paperwork work. I felt sick. Everything connected. The lawyers. The fake documents. The financial claims. The acquisition. The trust. But there was still one question. Where is Robert now? Michael looked at his phone. He called me. When? 20 minutes ago. What did he say? He knows you're here. My stomach dropped. How? I don't know. Where is he? Michael shook his head. He told me to bring him the folder. Ethan looked at him. Did you agree? No. Why not? Because I finally realized something. What? Michael looked at Ethan. Your grandfather wasn't trying to protect the money. He looked at me. He was trying to protect you from people who believed money made you theirs. I looked down at the folder. Then I opened it. The first document was a trust agreement. The second was a list of assets. The third was a series of letters. Then I found something that made me stop. A photograph. Claire. Pregnant. Standing beside my husband. The date was written underneath. September 3, 2015. Ethan stared at it. Mom. I nodded. She was pregnant with you. He looked at the photograph. She looks scared. She does. I turned it over. There was writing on the back. Claire knows the truth now. Then another sentence. She has agreed to disappear. I closed my eyes. Michael whispered. That was the beginning. I looked at him. What happened next? She left town. W-H-E. Did she go? I don't know. Michael. I really don't. Then who knows? He hesitated. Daniel. I felt anger rising again. He knew where she was all these years? I think so. Then why didn't he bring her back? Because she was useful where she was. I looked at Ethan. How? Because as long as Claire stayed away, nobody questioned the trust. I felt sick. Then another document caught my attention. It was a letter from Claire. Addressed to my husband. I read it. John. I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I don't know if Margaret will ever forgive me. But I can't let them hurt the baby. If I disappear, please make sure Ethan never knows why. I had to stop reading. Tears blurred the page. Ethan quietly took it from me. He read it himself. Then he looked up. I hate her. His voice broke. I know. I know she was scared. I know. But she still left me. Yes. He wiped his face. I can understand why someone does something and still hate what they did. I nodded. That is allowed. He looked at me. Is it? Yes. Can I forgive her someday? If you want. And if I never do? That's your choice too. He nodded. Then he returned the letter. I placed it back inside the folder. But there was one more document. A medical report. My husband's. The date was 2 days before his death. I read the first page. Then the second. Then I stopped. There was a note from his physician. Patient reports severe anxiety and believes he is being followed. My heart stopped. The next line was worse. Patient refuses hospital observation despite recommendation. I stared at the report. My husband had been afraid. He had told someone. And I hadn't known. I looked at Michael. Why didn't you tell me? He looked ashamed. Because your husband made me promise. You promised him? Yes. You watched me believe it was an accident. I know. You let me grieve without knowing. I know. I stood. You don't get to say you were protecting us. Michael looked at me. I was protecting myself. At least he was finally telling the truth. Then we heard a car outside. Michael went pale. That's him. Who? Robert. I walked toward the window. A black SUV had stopped across the street. A man stepped out. Robert. He wasn't alone. Jonathan Red stepped out behind him. I turned to Ethan. Take the folder. He held it against his chest. Michael looked toward the door. What do we do? I thought for a second. Then I remembered something from my husband's notebook. Never confront them where they expect you to. I looked at the back door. We leave. Michael shook his head. They'll see us. Not if we use the garage. We moved quickly. Ethan took the USB drive. I took the folder. Michael followed. We reached the garage. But before I could open the door, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. You have 10 minutes. Then another. Bring the folder. Then a third. Or Ethan pays the price. I froze. Michael looked at the screen. His face went white. Margaret. What? They know where he goes to school. I looked at Ethan. He was already staring at his phone. A photograph had arrived. It showed him walking out of school that afternoon. Taken from across the street. My hands went cold. Someone had been watching him. Not years ago. Today. And suddenly, all the documents in the folder seemed less important than the person standing outside our son's school. I looked at Michael. Can you get us somewhere safe? He nodded. I know a place. Where? He hesitated. Your husband's old cabin. I stared at him. The one in Pennsylvania? Yes. It's abandoned. That's why. I looked at Ethan. He nodded. We got into the car. Michael drove. For the first hour, nobody spoke. Then Ethan asked. Uncle Mike? Yes. Did Grandpa know you would eventually help me? Michael's hands tightened around the steering wheel. I don't know. Ethan looked out the window. I think he did. Michael glanced at him. Why? Because he wrote that someone would come back. He paused. And you came back. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I wish I'd come back sooner. The road stretched ahead. The sky darkened. And for the first time, I realized something. We weren't running away anymore. We were moving toward the truth. But when we reached the cabin that night, we discovered something waiting for us inside. The front door was unlocked. The lights were on. And sitting on the old wooden table was another black folder. This one wasn't from my husband. There was no name on it. Only 3 words. You missed one. Ethan opened it. Inside was a single photograph. A photograph of my husband. Daniel. Robert. And Claire. But Claire wasn't pregnant in this picture. She was holding something in her hands. A document. And on the back of the photograph was a date. 2 days after my husband's death. I looked at Ethan. Then at Michael. Nobody spoke. Because Claire hadn't disappeared after my husband's death. She had returned. And someone had been meeting with her. 2 days after we buried him. The question was no longer why Claire abandoned Ethan. The question was, what did she receive in exchange for disappearing? I kept staring at the photograph. Claire. Daniel. Robert. And my husband. 2 days after we buried him. The date was printed clearly on the back. There was no way to explain it away. Claire had been there. She had met the very people I believed had destroyed our family. And she had been holding a document. I looked at Michael. Did you know about this? He shook his head. No. Don't lie to me. I swear. Ethan took the photograph from my hand. He studied his other's face. She looks scared. She does, I said. But she's not crying. I looked closer. He was right. Claire looked frightened, but not heartbroken. Almost determined. Michael stepped closer. What does the document say? We can't see it. Ethan turned the photograph over. There was another line beneath the date. She signed. My stomach tightened. Signed what? Nobody answered. Then Ethan noticed something in the background. Wait. He pointed at the photograph. Behind Claire was a wall. On it hung a framed certificate. The name was visible. Mercer Holdings. This was taken at Daniel's office, Ethan said. I nodded. Then someone had to take the photograph. Michael looked at me. Maybe Robert. I thought about it. Or Daniel. But why? To prove Claire signed something. I turned the photograph over again. There was another mark in the bottom corner. A handwritten number. 47. What does that mean? Michael stared at it. I don't know. Ethan opened the black folder again. There were more photographs. Not just one. Dozens. Claire meeting Daniel. Claire entering an office. Claire leaving a bank. Claire sitting across from Jonathan Reed. Then one photograph made my heart stop. Claire was standing outside a courthouse. Holding Ethan as a baby. I stared at the image. That can't be. Michael looked. His face went pale. That's impossible. Why? Because Claire was supposed to have left before that. When was this? Ethan zoomed in. The date was visible. March 2016. Ethan had been born in January. 2 months later. Claire had been in the city. Holding him. I felt tears come to my eyes. She came back. Michael nodded. Apparently. Why didn't she bring him home? I don't know. We kept going through the photographs. Then we found one from the same day. Claire was standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. The woman was holding a folder. On the back was a handwritten note. Guardian transfer. I stared at it. What is a guardian transfer? Michael frowned. I don't know. Ethan looked at the picture. Maybe she was trying to give me to someone. My chest tightened. No. Grandma. No. He looked at me. You said she wanted to protect me. I know. Maybe this was how. I didn't have an answer. Then Michael noticed something. The woman standing beside Claire had a familiar face. He pulled the photograph closer. I know her. Who? Rebecca Shaw. Who is she? She worked for Daniel. What did she do? Financial administration. I remembered Sarah's words. Daniel had a network. Accountants. Lawyers. Companies. People who moved information. Rebecca had been one of them. We searched the other photographs. She appeared repeatedly. Always near Claire. Always carrying documents. Then Ethan said, "Why would Claire need a financial administrator?" I looked at him. "I don't know." Michael did. His face changed. Maybe she was creating another account. What kind? A trust account. I stared at him. For Ethan? Maybe. We searched the folder again. There it was. A bank statement. An account opened in Ethan's name. The date was February 2016. 1 month after his birth. The account contained $250,000. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Where did this money come from? Michael checked the statement. Several transfers. From? He read them. 3 different companies. Daniel's companies? No. Then whose? Michael looked at me. Your husband's. I froze. My husband was dead. Exactly. The money had been transferred after his death. Someone had moved $250,000 using accounts connected to my husband's estate. I felt sick. Who had access? Michael whispered. Robert. I looked at the photograph again. Robert. Claire. Daniel. Jonathan. Everyone connected. And yet the money had ended up in an account under Ethan's name. I didn't understand. Maybe it wasn't theft, Ethan said. What? Maybe Grandpa arranged it before he died. I looked at him. That would mean he knew exactly what was going to happen. Ethan nodded. Maybe. Then we found the document. It was an authorization. My husband's signature. The date was 3 days before his death. The document instructed Robert to transfer $250,000 into a protected account for Ethan. The signature appeared genuine. I stared at it. So Robert did exactly what Grandpa asked. Michael shook his head. Maybe. What do you mean? Look at the second page. I turned it. There was an additional clause. If Ethan's mother returned before he turned 18, she could request access to the funds. I felt cold. Claire could access the money. Only if she returned. And she did. Michael nodded. That means the account was designed to bring her back. Ethan stared at the page. Why would Grandpa do that? I didn't know. Then I remembered the letter. My husband had written. Claire knows the truth now. Maybe he didn't want Claire gone forever. Maybe he wanted her to return when she was ready. But Daniel had discovered the account. And he had used Claire's desperation to control her. I looked at the photographs again. Claire wasn't simply abandoning Ethan. She was trapped inside a plan my husband had created to protect him. But something had gone wrong. Very wrong. Then Ethan found another document. A withdrawal request. The entire $250,000 had been withdrawn. Date. 3 days after Claire disappeared. Authorized by Claire Whitmore. I stared at the signature. She took the money. Michael nodded. And disappeared. Where did it go? He shook his head. We need the bank records. I looked at the folder. There was a note. Follow the money. That was all. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Hello? A woman's voice spoke. Margaret? Yes. This is Rebecca Shaw. My heart stopped. Where are you? I need to meet you. Why? Because you found the account. How do you know? Because I opened it. I looked at Ethan. Where are you? I can't tell you over the phone. Then how do I know you're not working for Daniel? You don't. She paused. But I can prove it. How? Ask me about the transfer. What transfer? The $250,000. I waited. Rebecca said. Claire didn't steal that money. I felt a wave of relief. Then she added. She was forced to take it. By Daniel? Yes. Why? Because Daniel believed the money belonged to him. Why? Because your husband's company owed him. I frowned. My husband didn't owe Daniel anything. He did. What? Your husband borrowed money. I looked at Michael. He shook his head. Rebecca continued. Not for himself. For whom? For Claire. I felt my stomach tighten. What did he borrow money for? Legal protection. From Daniel? Yes. That doesn't make sense. It will. She gave me an address. A coffee shop. Tomorrow. 10 in the morning. How will I know you? You'll know. She hung up. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, Michael stayed at the cabin with Ethan. I went alone. I didn't want Rebecca to feel surrounded. I arrived 10 minutes early. A woman in her late 40s sat near the window. She looked exhausted. When she saw me, she stood. Margaret? Yes. I'm Rebecca. She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, You look exactly like your daughter. I sat down. Tell me everything. Rebecca shook her head. Not everything. Why not? Because some things are still dangerous. After 11 years? Yes. She pulled an envelope from her purse. This belonged to your husband. I opened it. Inside was a bank receipt. The $250,000. And another document. A loan agreement. My husband's signature. The borrower was Claire. I stared at it. Why? Claire had debts. How much? About $180,000. My heart skipped. The same amount my husband had received. Rebecca nodded. You see it now. The $180,000 wasn't income. No. It was the loan settlement. Yes. Then my husband borrowed money to pay Claire's debt. Correct. I looked at her. Why? Because Daniel was using the debt to control her. I felt anger rise. So Claire was trapped. Yes. Why didn't she tell me? She was ashamed. Of debt? Of everything. Rebecca looked down. She believed you would hate her. I already did. I know. The words hurt. But I couldn't deny them. Rebecca continued. Your husband tried to negotiate with Daniel. That's why they met. Yes. And Daniel refused. He wanted more. What? Control of the trust. I nod. Ed. That's what we've been discovering. Rebecca looked surprised. You know about the trust? Yes. Then you know why Daniel wanted Claire back. Because she could access the money. Rebecca shook her head. Not just the money. What else? The documents. What documents? Your husband's evidence. I leaned forward. Where are they? Rebecca looked around. Then lowered her voice. Claire took them. My heart stopped. Claire? Yes. When? The day she withdrew the $250,000. Why? To protect them. Then where are they? I don't know. I felt frustrated. Everyone knows something but nobody knows the whole story. Rebecca looked at me. I know where Claire went. I froze. Where? She went to Oregon. My breath caught. She's alive? Rebecca nodded. Yes. Why hasn't she contacted Ethan? Because she was afraid. Of Daniel? Of what Daniel would do if she did. I stared at her. Does Daniel know where she is? No. Are you sure? As sure as I can be. Then why is she coming after Ethan now? Rebecca hesitated. Because she thinks Daniel is finally going to lose. I frowned. What does that mean? She believes your grandson is the one person Daniel can't control. I thought about everything. The company. The trust. The acquisition. Claire's lawsuit. The fake documents. Maybe Claire wasn't trying to take Ethan's future. Maybe she was trying to regain access to the trust because the evidence inside it could finally expose Daniel. But then why had she filed against Ethan? I asked Rebecca. She didn't file the claim alone. Rebecca looked at me. No. Who did? Robert. My stomach dropped. Robert filed it? He created the legal structure. And Claire signed? Yes. Why? Because Daniel convinced her that Ethan's company would be seized. I understood. Daniel had frightened Claire into believing she had to act first. Rebecca leaned closer. There is one thing you don't know. What? Claire has been trying to contact Ethan. I stared at her. Since when? Months. Why didn't she? She was stopped. By whom? Rebecca didn't answer. I already knew. Robert. She nodded. Robert intercepted her messages. I felt sick. That meant Claire hadn't simply returned. Someone had been controlling what reached Ethan. And Robert had been at the center of it. I stood. Where is Claire? Rebecca hesitated. She'll contact you. When? Soon. How soon? Rebecca looked toward the window. Today. I returned to the cabin. Ethan was sitting at the table. Michael stood nearby. I told them everything. Ethan didn't speak for several seconds. Then he asked. She wants to talk to me? Yes. After 11 years? Yes. He looked down. I don't know if I want to. You don't have to. He nodded. Then his phone rang. Unknown number. We all froze. Ethan looked at me. I nodded. He answered. Hello? A woman's voice came through. I couldn't hear the words. But Ethan's face changed. His eyes filled with tears. Mom? Michael looked away. Ethan listened. Then said, Where are you? Silence. He stood. What? His face went pale. Why? He looked at me. Then whispered. She says Robert is coming. The line suddenly went dead. A second later, headlights appeared outside the cabin. 2 vehicles. One was Robert's. The other belonged to Daniel. I grabbed the folder. Michael locked the door. Ethan stood beside me. For 11 years, my grandson had believed his mother abandoned him. Now she was finally trying to tell him why. And the 2 men who had spent 11 years hiding the truth had just arrived at our door. I looked at Ethan. Whatever happens next, you don't owe anyone forgiveness. He nodded. Then someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Robert's voice came through the door. Margaret, open the door. I said nothing. He knocked again. You need to give me the folder. I looked at Ethan. Then at Michael. Finally, I looked at the black folder in my hands. My husband's final instructions were inside. The evidence that could destroy Daniel. The truth about Claire. And perhaps the answer to what really happened 11 years ago. I held it tighter. Then Robert said something that made my blood run cold. "Margaret, your husband didn't die in an accident." Silence. "He was killed." I stared at the door. Robert continued. "And if you don't open this door." He paused. "You'll never learn who ordered it." Robert's words hung in the cabin. He was killed. For 11 years, I had lived with the belief that my husband's death was a tragedy. An accident. A terrible night. Something that happened to us. Now the man standing outside my door was telling me it had been deliberate. Ethan looked at me. "Grandma." I raised one finger. "Don't open the door." Robert knocked again. "Margaret, you need to hear me." I called back. "Then talk through the door." There was a pause. Daniel didn't kill John. I felt my heart pound. "Then who did?" "I can tell you." "Start talking." Robert sighed. "John discovered the entire operation." "What operation?" "The trust manipulation. The shell companies. The fraudulent loans. The pressure they put on Claire." "And you?" "I was involved." Michael whispered behind me. "I knew it." Robert continued. "But I wasn't the one who ordered John's death." "Who was?" Silence. Then Robert said, "Michael's father." I turned. Michael looked as shocked as I was. "My father?" "Yes." Michael shook his head. "No." Robert continued. "David believed John was going to expose everyone." "That doesn't make sense." "It does if you understand what John had discovered." I held the folder against my chest. What did he discover? David had been moving money through the same companies Daniel used. Michael stared at the door. "You're lying. Ask your uncle about the account." Michael stepped forward. "What account?" "The one John found." I looked at Michael. He shook his head. "I don't know what he's talking about." Robert's voice became colder. "Your father received money from Daniel." "How much?" "Over $300,000. Michael went pale. I stared at him. "Is that true?" He couldn't finish. "Michael?" He looked at me. "My father was in debt." "That doesn't answer the question." "Yes." He lowered his head. "He took the money." "Why?" "I don't know." Robert laughed softly outside. "You know exactly why." Michael walked toward the door. "Robert, stop." "Why?" "Because the truth is inconvenient?" Michael's face hardened. "You don't get to talk about truth. You've been hiding it for 11 years. So have you." Silence. Then Robert said, "Exactly." I looked at Ethan. Something was changing. The people who had spent months pretending to be enemies were now standing on the same side of an old secret. I asked Robert. If David ordered the death, why did Daniel keep working with him? Because Daniel didn't know everything. What does that mean? David hired someone. Who? I don't know. I felt frustrated. You expect me to believe that? No. Robert's voice softened. That's why I want you to open the door. I looked at the folder. No. Then listen carefully. He lowered his voice. Your husband left a recording. I have it. Robert went silent. You opened the USB? Yes. Then you know. I know enough. No, Margaret. His voice suddenly sounded desperate. You know what John wanted you to know. I frowned. What does that mean? The USB wasn't complete. I looked at Ethan. What? Your husband created 2 copies. One with David? Yes. And the other? With me. I felt a chill. You had the second copy all these years? Yes. Why didn't you tell me? Because I was waiting for Ethan to turn 18. He's 16. I know. Then why now? Because Daniel found out about the trust. And you decided to help us? I decided I didn't want another person to die. That sentence silenced me. Then I heard something behind Robert. A car door. I looked through the window. Daniel was standing outside. He wasn't alone. Jonathan Reed stood beside him. And behind them was a woman. Claire. My breath stopped. Ethan saw her. He moved toward the window. Mom. Claire looked up. For a moment, neither of them moved. 11 years disappeared between them. Ethan was no longer the little boy she had left behind. He was 6. Ian. Tall. Quiet. Angry. Claire raised her hand toward the window. She was crying. Ethan didn't move. I stepped toward him. You don't have to go outside. He shook his head. I want to hear her. We opened the door. Robert stepped back. Claire looked at Ethan. I'm sorry. Ethan's face remained still. Why did you leave? Claire's lips trembled. I thought I was saving you. You didn't. I know. You missed everything. I know. You weren't there when Grandma raised me. I know. You weren't there when Grandpa died. Claire started crying. I know. Ethan's voice cracked. Then why should I believe anything you say now? Claire wiped her face. Because I'm finally not afraid. I looked at Daniel. He stood several feet away. Calm. Almost amused. Claire turned toward him. He threatened to take you away from me. Ethan frowned. I thought you abandoned me. I wanted to come back. When? Many times. Then why didn't you? Because every time I tried, Daniel reminded me what would happen. Daniel smiled faintly. She's lying. Claire looked at him. You told me you would destroy Ethan. I never said that. You said you'd make sure he lost everything. Daniel shook his head. That's not the same thing. I stepped forward. Enough. Everyone became quiet. I looked at Daniel. You've spent 11 years manipulating my family. He smiled. That's a strong accusation. You know what happened to my husband. He didn't answer. Did you kill him? No. Did you arrange his death? No. Did you know it was going to happen? Daniel looked at me. Then he said, yes. The air seemed to disappear. Ethan stared at him. What? Daniel remained calm. I knew someone intended to confront your grandfather. Who? David. Michael stepped forward. My father? Yes. Why? Because your grandfather was going to expose him. Michael looked devastated. What did he do? Daniel looked at him. Your father hired someone. Who? I never found out. I stared at Daniel. You knew my husband was in danger. Yes. And you did nothing. Yes. Why? Because I wanted his evidence. I felt anger rise. You let him die for paperwork. Daniel's expression didn't change. I didn't kill him. But you could have stopped it. Yes. That admission was worse. I looked at Robert. And you? Robert lowered his head. I found out afterward. Then why did you stay quiet? Because I was afraid. Of Daniel? Of everyone. I looked at Claire. And you? She stepped closer. I tried to tell the police. What happened? Robert stopped me. I turned sharply. Robert didn't deny it. Why? Because I had no proof. Claire shook her head. You didn't even let me try. Robert looked at her. If you went to the police, Daniel would have destroyed the trust. I didn't care about the money. I know. Claire looked at Ethan. I cared about him. Ethan didn't respond. Then Daniel spoke. This is getting sentimental. I looked at him. You're done. He smiled. You think you can beat me with a folder? No. I held it up. I think you already beat yourself. His smile disappeared. I continued. You made the mistake of believing everyone around you was loyal. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What did you do? I smiled. We copied everything. He looked at Robert. Then Michael. Then Claire. You're bluffing. No. Ethan held up his phone. Everything in the folder is backed up. Daniel's face changed. Where? Multiple places. He looked at Robert. Robert said nothing. Daniel took a step toward Ethan. I moved between them. Don't. He stopped. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Then a car pulled into the driveway. Two people stepped out. A woman and a man. The woman approached with an official badge. Margaret Whitmore? Yes. I'm with the State Financial Crimes Division. Daniel immediately stepped back. The investigator looked at him. Daniel Mercer? He didn't answer. We need to speak with you. He looked toward Jonathan. Jonathan shook his head. Don't say anything. The investigator continued. We also have a federal request concerning several financial entities connected to you. Daniel's face hardened. I looked at Robert. He had made the call. Not me. Robert stepped forward. I sent them the evidence. Daniel stared at him. You betrayed me. Robert shook his head. No. He looked at Ethan. I finally stopped betraying them. The investigators took the folder. The USB drive. The photographs. The bank records. Everything. Daniel was questioned. Jonathan was separated. Michael agreed to provide a statement. Sarah later provided her own. And Claire finally told the investigators everything she knew. But there was still one question. My husband. Who had actually killed him? That answer came 3 weeks later. A man named Thomas Vale was arrested in connection with the old case. He had been hired 11 years earlier. And the person who paid him wasn't Daniel. It was David. Michael's father. David had believed my husband would expose him and destroy everything he had built. The payment records had been hidden inside the same financial network Daniel had used. Daniel hadn't ordered the murder. But he had known it was coming. And he had chosen money over a man's life. That distinction didn't make him innocent. It only made the truth more complicated. The investigation eventually uncovered enough evidence to prosecute several people for financial crimes. Some faced prison. Others lost professional licenses. Daniel's companies were dismantled. Jonathan lost his legal career. Sarah cooperated with investigators and avoided the worst consequences because she had voluntarily provided evidence. Michael testified against the people who had used him. Claire withdrew her claim against Ethan. But the most important consequence wasn't financial. It was personal. Ethan finally had the truth. And sometimes the truth doesn't feel like justice. Sometimes it just hurts differently. One evening, months later, Ethan and I sat in my husband's old study. The black folder was gone. The documents were now with investigators. The house was quiet. Ethan held the old photograph of Claire. "Grandma?" "Yes." "Do you think Mom really loved me?" I looked at him. "Yes." He was silent. "Do you think she made the right choice?" I thought carefully. "No." He nodded. "I don't either. But understanding why someone hurt you doesn't mean you have to excuse it." He looked at the photograph. "I know." Then he asked, "Do you think Grandpa would be proud of me?" That question broke something inside me. I smiled through tears. "He would be." "How do you know?" "Because he built everything around protecting your future." Ethan looked toward the old desk. "I wish I'd known him." "So do I." We sat there quietly. Then Ethan placed the photograph inside the drawer. He didn't throw it away. He didn't keep staring at it. He simply put it somewhere safe. That was his choice. Not mine. And I realized that was what my husband had wanted all along. Not control. Not revenge. Choice. Ethan had spent his entire life having other people make choices for him. Claire chose to leave. Daniel chose to manipulate him. Michael chose silence. Robert chose fear. His grandfather chose protection. And I chose to raise him. But now Ethan was old enough to choose for himself. He decided to keep the company. He refused Claire's request for immediate forgiveness. But he agreed to meet her. Once. Without lawyers. Without Daniel. Without anyone else. I didn't ask what they discussed. Some things belonged only to them. Later that evening, Ethan came home. He looked different. Not happier exactly. Lighter. "How was it?" I asked. He sat beside me. "She cried." "And you?" "I did too." I waited. "Did you forgive her?" He shook his head. "Not yet." Then he smiled faintly. "But I think I might someday." I nodded. "That is enough." Months passed. Tracknest survived. The acquisition eventually went through on Ethan's terms. The trust remained protected. And the money Daniel had spent years chasing became almost irrelevant. Because Ethan had learned something far more valuable. His future wasn't something other people could negotiate over. It belonged to him. As for Claire, she started rebuilding her life. Slowly. She didn't ask Ethan for money. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply showed up when he allowed her to. That mattered. Michael changed too. He stopped hiding behind excuses. He admitted what he had done. He apologized. And for the first time in years, he started paying back the people he had hurt. Not with promises. With actions. As for me, I finally opened every box my husband had left behind. I found old photographs. Letters. Receipts. Notes. And one final envelope. It wasn't addressed to Ethan. It was addressed to me. I opened it one morning alone. Inside was a single page. My husband's handwriting. "Margaret. If you're reading this, then Ethan survived what I feared most. I don't know whether you'll ever understand why I kept things from you. Maybe you won't forgive me. But if there is one thing I want you to remember, it's this. Protecting someone does not mean controlling their life. Eventually, you have to give them the truth and let them choose what to do with it. I read the final sentence twice. Make sure Ethan gets that choice. I folded the letter. For 11 years, I had thought revenge meant making the people who hurt us suffer. But that wasn't what happened. Daniel lost his power because his own greed created the evidence against him. Robert lost his position because fear made him hide the truth. Michael lost years with his family because silence had consequences. Claire lost 11 years with her son because she believed fear was protection. And I learned something I wish I had understood sooner. Sometimes justice isn't about destroying the people who hurt you. Sometimes it's about refusing to let what they did determine who you become. Ethan didn't become bitter. He didn't become cruel. He didn't use his wealth to punish anyone. He simply became impossible to manipulate. And that was the part of the story I was proudest of. Because the people who tried to control his future failed. Not because we became more powerful than them. But because, eventually, we stopped letting fear make our decisions. I still think about my husband. I still wonder what would have happened if he had told me everything 11 years earlier. Maybe things would have been different. Maybe they would have been worse. I'll never know. But I know this. He was right about one thing. The truth has a way of waiting. You can bury documents. You can hide money. You can change names. You can move across the country. You can convince people to stay silent. But eventually, someone opens the right drawer. Someone asks the right question. Someone decides they are no longer afraid. And when that happens, the truth doesn't need revenge. It simply needs a chance to be heard. So if there's one thing I would tell anyone listening to my story, it's this. Don't confuse forgiveness with permission. Don't confuse family with loyalty. And never let someone convince you that protecting yourself means surrendering your right to the truth. I spent 11 years believing my daughter abandoned my grandson. The truth was far more complicated. She was afraid. My husband was trying to protect him. Michael was hiding his guilt. Robert was hiding his fear. And Daniel was hiding behind all of them. But in the end, the person who mattered most wasn't any of them. It was Ethan. Because after 11 years of other people deciding his future, he finally chose it for himself. And honestly, that was the greatest revenge of all. If this story made you think about trust, family, or the choices people make when they're afraid, tell me in the comments. Would you have forgiven Claire after learning the truth, or would 11 years have been too much to forget? And if you want more emotional stories about betrayal, justice, and the kind of revenge that doesn't require becoming the villain, subscribe to Royal Revenge Stories. Because sometimes the strongest revenge isn't hurting the person who hurt you. It's building a life they can never control. 6 months after everything ended, I found myself standing in the same room where this entire nightmare had started. My husband's old study. The room looked different now. Not because the furniture had changed. Because I had. For years, I couldn't walk into this room without feeling like I was stepping backward in time. Now I could sit at his desk without feeling like the past was waiting to punish me. The black folder was gone. The USB drive was gone. The photographs were gone. The evidence had all been turned over. What remained were memories. And one empty drawer. I opened it. Inside was the last thing I had kept from the investigation. A photograph of Ethan as a baby. Claire was holding him. She looked exhausted. Young. Terrified. But she was smiling. I had spent years looking at that photograph and seeing only one thing. A mother who left. Now I saw something else. A woman who had made a terrible decision while believing she had no good choices. That didn't erase what she had done. But I had finally learned that understanding someone didn't require rewriting the damage they caused. I put the photograph back. Then I heard footsteps. Ethan appeared in the doorway. Grandma? I'm here. He smiled. You ready? For what? Mom's coming. I nodded. Claire had started visiting regularly. Not every week. Not even every month. Whenever Ethan wanted. That had been his rule. No pressure. No promises. No pretending 11 years could disappear. At first, their meetings had been awkward. They talked about school. Work. Food. Movies. Anything except the years between them. Then, slowly, they started talking about the past. One conversation at a time. One uncomfortable truth at a time. Ethan never pretended it hadn't hurt. Claire never asked him to. That was probably why their relationship began to heal. Not quickly. Not perfectly. But honestly. We walked outside. Claire stood near the driveway. When she saw Ethan, she smiled. He walked toward her. They hugged. I looked away. Not because I was uncomfortable. Because some moments don't belong to the person who spent years protecting them. They belong to the people finally finding their way back to each other. I went inside. And for the first time in 11 years, I wasn't afraid of what would happen next. Because there was no next battle. No hidden document. No lawyer waiting to knock. No secret bank account. No person trying to take something that wasn't theirs. The case had ended. Daniel had been convicted on multiple financial charges. Jonathan had lost his license. Sarah had testified and accepted responsibility for her role. Michael had cooperated fully with the investigation. And David's involvement in my husband's death had finally been established. The man hired to carry it out had been convicted. My husband's death was no longer officially an accident. It was a crime. That distinction mattered. Not because it brought him back. It didn't. But because for 11 years, I had carried the wrong story inside me. Now I knew the truth. And strangely, the truth didn't make me hate my husband. It made me understand him. He had known something dangerous was happening. He had tried to protect Claire. He had tried to protect Ethan. And he had tried to protect me. He hadn't been perfect. He had kept secrets. He had made decisions without me. But he had loved us. That was the part one finally allowed myself to remember. Not the fear. Not the documents. Not the investigation. Just him. The man who used to leave coffee beside my bed every morning. The man who always forgot where he put his keys. The man who danced badly in the kitchen when he thought nobody was watching. That was how I wanted to remember him. Not as a victim. As my husband. A few weeks later, Ethan made a decision. He wanted to change the trust. Not destroy it. Not give it away. Change it. He met with an independent attorney. One who had never worked with our family. He reviewed everything himself. Then he created a structure that gave him complete control once he reached the required age. He also added something his grandfather had never included. A rule. No family member could ever use the trust to control another family member's life. When I read it, I smiled. That sounds like you. Ethan laughed. I learned from everyone else's mistakes. He paused. Then added. And yours. I raised an eyebrow. Mine? You tried to protect me from everything. I sighed. I know. You didn't tell me everything either. I know. But you stayed. I looked at him. That was different. Maybe. He smiled. You stayed. I reached over and squeezed his hand. Yes. I'll always be grateful for that. That sentence meant more to me than any apology ever could. Because there were years when I wondered whether raising Ethan had been enough. Whether love could calm. Pens ate for the things he had lost. I eventually realized that wasn't my decision to make. I couldn't give him back his childhood. I couldn't replace his mother. I couldn't bring his grandfather back. But I could stand beside him while he built the life that came next. And that was enough. One evening, I received an envelope in the mail. There was no return address. Inside was a single handwritten note. From Claire. It said, Margaret. I know there are things between us that may never completely heal. I don't expect them to. But thank you for giving Ethan the life I was too afraid to give him. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I'm not asking for it. I'm only asking you to know that I finally understand what you did for him. You didn't just raise my son. You gave him a home when I couldn't. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to become someone worthy of being his mother. I read the letter twice. Then I folded it. I didn't call Claire. I didn't need to. Some things didn't need immediate answers. Some relationships needed time. I placed the letter beside my husband's photograph. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt peace. Not complete peace. Life doesn't work that way. But enough. Enough to breathe. Enough to sleep. Enough to stop wondering what would happen tomorrow. A year after the first legal challenge, Ethan graduated high school. He stood on the stage in his cap and gown. I sat in the audience. Claire was there. Michael was there. Frank was there. Even Robert attended. He sat several rows behind us. He had accepted responsibility for his part in the scheme and had spent months helping investigators reconstruct what happened. When Ethan's name was called, I stood. I clapped until my hands hurt. He looked toward me. Then toward Claire. Then back at me. And smiled. I cried. I didn't care who saw. After the ceremony, Ethan hugged me. You okay? I laughed through tears. No. He smiled. Good. Why good? Because if you were okay, I'd think you didn't care. I hugged him tighter. I care too much. I know. Then he whispered. We made it. I closed my eyes. Yes. We really made it. Yes. And standing there, surrounded by people who had once been connected to the worst period of our lives, I finally understood something. We hadn't won because Daniel went to prison. We hadn't won because Robert confessed. We hadn't won because Claire came back. We hadn't won because Ethan kept the trust. We won because none of them controlled us anymore. That was the difference. For 11 years, other people's decisions had shaped our lives. Now they didn't. Ethan chose his future. Claire chose accountability. Michael chose honesty. I chose peace. And that was enough. Years later, I still think about that first night. The night Claire left. The night I held a little boy who couldn't understand why his mother wasn't coming back. I remember the anger. The confusion. The promises I made to him. I remember saying, "You'll never be alone." At the time, I thought that meant I had to protect him from the world. Now I understand what it really meant. It meant I would stay beside him while he learned to face the world himself. There is a difference. And maybe that's the lesson I needed most. Love isn't always about protecting someone from pain. Sometimes love means telling them the truth. Sometimes it means letting them make choices you wouldn't make. Sometimes it means forgiving without forgetting. And sometimes it means walking away from people who have spent years convincing you that family gives them the right to control you. It doesn't. Family should be the place where you are safest to be yourself. Not the place where you are most afraid to say no. I used to think revenge meant making people feel the pain they caused. I don't anymore. The people who betrayed us eventually faced the consequences of their own choices. I didn't have to destroy them. I didn't have to become cruel. I didn't have to break the law. I simply stopped protecting their secrets. And once the truth was allowed to speak for itself, it did what revenge never could. It gave us our lives back. So if you're listening to my story and you're wondering whether justice is possible after years of betrayal, I can't promise you that it will look exactly the way you imagine. Sometimes justice is a courtroom. Sometimes it's a contract. Sometimes it's an apology that comes too late. And sometimes justice is simply waking up one morning and realizing the person who hurt you no longer has any power over your life. That was my revenge. Not watching Daniel lose everything. Not seeing Claire come back. Not seeing Ethan inherit what his grandfather left him. My greatest revenge was watching Ethan become a man who no longer needed anyone's permission to decide who he was. He wasn't the abandoned child anymore. He wasn't the target of someone else's plan. He wasn't the future everyone fought over. He was simply Ethan. My grandson. My family. And his life belonged to him. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you trusted, I'd love to know what you would have done in my position. Would you have forgiven Claire? Would you have exposed the truth even if it destroyed the family? Or would you have chosen silence to protect the people you loved? Tell me in the comments. And if this story stayed with you, subscribe to Royal Revenge Stories for more stories about betrayal, family secrets, justice, and the kind of revenge that doesn't require becoming the person who hurt you. Because sometimes the most powerful ending isn't watching your enemy fall. It's realizing you no longer care whether they do. And after 11 years of secrets, fear, betrayal, and unanswered questions, I finally stopped looking behind me. I looked at Ethan. He was laughing with his friends. Claire was standing nearby. The sun was going down. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't waiting for something terrible to happen. I was simply watching my grandson live. And that was enough. The past had taken 11 years from us. It wasn't going to take another day.